Good evening, everybody. Tonight we will go deep into the realm of the unknown and question everything as we search for the truth. We will explore the possibility of countless phenomena within the ultra spectrum, and together we will learn that it is all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association, and it is a live stream broadcast. If you have a question, send me a super chat or become a YouTube member. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. Take a seat, relax, get ready, and welcome to Beyond the TinFoil Hat.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond the TinFoil Hat. Today is Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and I, Ryan Stacey, am your host this evening. I'm a licensed private investigator, a citizen journalist, and the director of investigations for the Experiencers Support Association, and welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us this evening. All special thanks to our YouTube members and help keep this program free and for others and all the other experiencers out there. Remember, as a member, you get to ask your questions live here tonight. For all you non-members, you can send a super chat or send a tip on Rockfin, and then we'll get your questions there. Every little bit helps. At the end of the show, we're going to do an after chat with Stacey and our guest. And it is going to be interesting, and we'll answer some questions together there. So tonight's discussion is about UFO research and government disclosure. Our guest for season 4, the season finale, episode 37, is Richard Dolan. Now, Richard is a very, very special guest. As many of you know, my interest in UFOs began with MUFON, and it was in 2018 that I met him for the first time at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto, Ontario. I finished my report measuring the valuable UFO data from MUFON Canada, and Richard heard about it, asked to sit beside me, and went over it with me. For him, that was probably something he does with everyone. But for me, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And I still feel like that right now. And I see him in the chat that this is surreal for me. I showed him my work. We took a few pictures and away he went. I remember, and that thought stayed with me through the whole day. And I had to do all these MUFON things. And he went amongst his thing and did all his things. And I remember sitting at the bar at the event, after the end of the event, and seeing Richard alone for a minute. And I snuck out. And I went there and I talked to him on the level. I had a private conversation with him, and I told him my theory about how we must investigate everything together, pay attention to everything because it's all connected. It was a great conversation. And then in the end, he ended up inviting me to be a part of his podcast in August 2018. So this podcast, Richard gave me the opportunity to talk about what I thought was going on. He encouraged me and he inspired me to do something bigger and better for experiencers. And I'm saying this because I know he's sitting there and I know he's listening. And it's just very important for everybody to understand that this man has influenced a lot of my decisions and things that I have done because he gave me the time and pulled me out of a dark place. So little did he know that I would take those words personally and hold them close to my heart. 4 months later, I exited MUFON and I had my first consciousness experience, which we've talked about many times in this show. With all those things, along with the support from my beautiful wife and CC's help over the last few years, we created the Experiencers Support Association based on focusing on the experiencers, which is what we were talking about then. Now, 4 years later, there's 4 again. On December 1st, 2022, add up December 1st, there's 12 plus 1, there's your 4. 444. Weird, right? 4 years later, our season finale. It is a grand honor to present and welcome Richard Dolan to the show. For over 20 years, Richard Dolan has been one of the best known UFO researchers in the world. He's the author of several groundbreaking books in this field, opening new ways of understanding this perplexed subject. His massive 2-volume history, UFOs and the national security state, have permanently altered our understanding of the history of UFOs and the government cover-up. He is the co-host of the classic book AD, After Disclosure, which opened an entire conversation on how UFO disclosure could take place and what that might mean for the world. His book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind remains the best single volume to discuss the full range of the UFO subject in all of its complexity. His most recent book, The Alien Agendas, is another unique contribution to the subject. It is one of the few attempts to analyze the beings behind the UFO phenomenon by examining the long history of our encounters with them. Aside from being one of ufology's most engaging writers, Richard has been in front of the camera and microphone for many years and has spoken to audiences worldwide. These days, Richard is working on his third volume of UFOs and the national security state while managing an active website, richarddolanmembers.com, which features new writings, videos, and audio content by Richard every week. And you can get his links in the description below. So, Richard, put on your tinfoil hat. We are about to go down a rabbit hole. How are you?
Hi, Ryan. I'm really glad to be here. It was very nice. I didn't know every single detail of the backstory of when we met, so that was kind of
it was behind the scenes. And I thought, I got the opportunity to say it, put it on the record, and I mean that. You especially to the audience that listens to all these things that I've been doing, has been following me all these years. I just needed to tell you and everybody that you inspired this to happen. So
it's touching, and it meant a lot to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'll just mention when you're reading my current project, I'm always working on volume 3 of UFOs in the National Security State, and that poor book. So every other little project that I decide to take on gets in front of it.
Yeah.
So I started working on a history of USOs, which I'm actually deep into. Submersible underwater, submersible unidentified object. And but then I put something in front of that I just finished, which was in addition to UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, which is a book I wrote almost 10 years ago. And I just finished yesterday 45 pages to add to that as an expanded edition. So basically catching ufology up for the last decade. So I've been busy, but yes, volume 3 of National Security State is definitely happening.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to start with our icebreaker question, which comes from Cece, who runs our Experiencers Anonymous group. So her question to kick off the evening is, with all your experience in the field of ufology, since its foundations to present, what have you noticed as positive movement for disclosure? And what would you suggest may be the current / next disinformation campaign on this subject?
Oh, what a great two-part question. Well, positive developments, there's several, but the big one is that our world is like, we still have some freedom to research and to communicate the results of that research in a world, where we've got a lot of different people doing archival research. We've got a lot of people doing different kinds of research. The leaks have really started since 2017, since the New York Times, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal did their work to talk about ATIP and the Tic Tac UFO. It does seem that we're still in a phase of movement. Now, that movement's got a lot of resistance from within the national security apparatus. And, I can almost see the same patterns emerging today that were emerging, say, back in the 1960s, when, most people aren't old enough to remember that. I'm not old enough to remember it, really. But what happened was, in the 60s, there was a big outgrowth of UFO sightings. It got the attention of Congress. It was a big thing. And there was a big expectation that something would happen. And what did happen is that the Air Force hired the University of Colorado to do a scientific study of UFOs, which turned out to be a debunking exercise. And what makes me think of it in terms of today is that back then the Air Force was really smart. The CIA was very smart. They took the initiative. They hired a study that was essentially a foregone conclusion, and they were able to slam the lid down on UFOs for many, many years after that. And I see a similar pattern happening today. So you've got the Pentagon, which essentially playing this game of pretend, like as if we don't know what these things are out there. And well, we're looking into it. It seems like it's a new thing for us. Yeah, sure. Like UFOs never happened before 2004 with the Tic Tac and the Nimitz case. So they're playing this public relations game here. And the last hearing that they did for Congress last spring was, insulting. I mean, there were a couple of good things that came out of it, but the Pentagon's contribution was really, really poor. And I think that's the pattern. Now they've hired NASA to do a so-called study, and I think we know where that's going to end up. There's no way that NASA is at all ever going to come to a positive conclusion on UFOs. They cannot and they will not. So I think we're looking at a lot of the same types of developments. And, keep in mind, back in the 60s, it took several years for that whole thing to play out, from this great crescendo of sightings and hope that people had to the great disappointment in the beginning of, was it 1968 when the Condon Committee said no, or was it 69, 68? And so it took a few years, and it's taking a little longer here. We're starting in 2017. We're now 5 years down the road, but it could be playing out in a similar way. So we have to watch out for that.
Yeah, interesting too, because like on this side of the border, we've been kind of piggybacking off of that movement because, it's been in mainstream media, and me and a few other independent people are trying to push that narrative on this side. As of late, we've had a politician named Larry Maguire who's put questions towards the House of Commons to get answers and things like that too. So there's some pressure, but that couldn't have happened if we didn't have that conversation happening in the States. So even if
that's right,
there's this larger movement, I guess, this way around, but it still feels to me that it's going to end up with a nothing burger again. Now, in your opinion, if they don't provide us with anything, is it because they don't want us to know, or is there nothing to tell us?
No, it's the former. It's they don't want to tell. Also, though, you could say that government, the inquiring bodies of a government, whether in Canada or the United States, it's very, very unlikely that they are going to have access to any of the information that they're looking for. For example, it's now becoming pretty clear that the whole purpose of OSAP and ATIP in the U.S., which started up in 2007, it sure looks like that was, at least in part, an attempt by a certain faction within the government, including Senator Harry Reid and people around Robert Bigelow. It was their attempt to locate the actual deep UFO program that has always been believed to exist within the U.S. government. And I do think that that was a big part of what they were trying to do. So in other words, if that's right, you have a situation where just government players in the U.S., undoubtedly in Canada, if they're interested in the UFO or UAP subject, good luck trying to get to the bottom of it. Famously back in the early 90s, the new U.S. president, Bill Clinton, told his very long-time friend, who he worked with in Arkansas, Webster Hubbell, who he placed as number 2 at the Department of Justice, number 2. He said, look, find me everything you can find out about who killed Kennedy and are there UFOs? Those are the 2 questions that Bill Clinton wanted to know. And according to what Hubbell wrote about, he, I don't know how hard he really looked, but, he was Bill Clinton's buddy. He was his friend, and he got nowhere. He got absolutely nowhere with that query. So it's very difficult, I think, for most government officials in the U.S. certainly to get into this, because you got a subject that is so deeply buried within special access programs, within the Pentagon, and certainly within the Department of Energy, and certainly within the CIA as well, and maybe elsewhere. So it's very tough to get at these things. President's not a dictator. He can't just snap his fingers and say, give me that. I know some researchers think it's easier, but I don't think it works like that.
I appreciate that, because it's where my mind went to is just trying to think of the process or the game that we play in order to get little bits and pieces. So with freedom of information, we have the right to request information, but we're requesting it from them, who has the choice to release this information. So we don't get this access to this information immediately. We're basically letting them know, showing our cards what we're interested in, and then waiting for them to review it at that time and decide whether or not they're going to give it to us. So they're working with us.
Yeah. And if you know where to look and who to ask also, like it's, and if they really are working hard to fulfill your request.
Yeah.
Or if they,
but they're
taking
the task to have that illusion that they're helping with it. But when they have that choice, now here on the Canada side, if I were to compare how, like, America gets a lot of redactions, we get some information over here in the States that we can at least work with. I can trace some leads and follow up and find these people, because there's not a lot of that stuff redacted, but it's still redacted in a sense. So, like, why do you think there would be a difference in that subject between borders?
I don't know. Well, there's a few differences. I'm not a FOIA expert. You know, someone like John Greenwald knows this a million times better than I do. He does FOIA all the time, and I don't. But I do know that, for example, think of an agency that works with the U.S. and Canada, which would be NORAD, North American Air Defense. So Canadians are part of that. And it has been true that at times Canadians have been able to get information out of NORAD that is not available to Americans. Because there are differences, there are some differences in the laws between the two nations. I don't know how much easier it is for Canadians to get information out of their government than it is for Americans to do the same here. I don't know the details on that.
Well, assuming we're looking for the same thing and asking the right questions, I find it very easy to get a response. I'm getting evidence of investigations. I'm getting evidence verifying that a response was made by an unusual report. So there's evidence that our Canadian government is responding, but we're not getting any information that confirms what they're responding to. So that part's still secret. But at least with that, we know that they're reacting to it. And if there's nothing bad happening, then perhaps they're protecting us, or protecting the States, or protecting someone else. They're protecting someone, and we don't need to know that stuff. So another thing that I found interesting on this side of the border too is when that story broke, some of us pushed the questions to our government to get the. So Daniel Otis is a journalist out here, and he ended up getting the Royal Canadian Air Force, I believe, to comment on it, and they basically considered what's happening in the States as something that's not a threat. So they only deal with things that are threatening. So that was in regards to the Tic Tac incident. So how do you fare on I guess that piece of information or evidence, especially when Congress, I guess, is suggesting that they're drones now, or some other type of technology that's not UFO?
Well, yeah. So wait, I just want to make sure I understand. So you're indicating that when the Canadian government answered an inquiry on Tic Tac UFO encounter of 2004, is that what you're saying? They responded to an inquiry on that?
They responded to I don't have the exact inquiry, but they're responding to the UAP report that had just come out from Okay.
I don't know. I wonder what the Canadian government said about that. I actually am not aware of their response. So
I can pull it up later and I can say.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we want to, I don't know how relevant it's going to be. I mean, what can they possibly say about it? There's almost nothing in it to begin with. So that report, which came out over about a year and a half ago now, is 9 pages long, 3 of which are just title and addendum. I mean, it's actually six pages of text, and not even very much. So I don't know what anyone could possibly say about it. That report is interesting in the sense that, despite the fact that it said nothing, it said a few things. If that makes any sense. So that's the report where they said there were 144 cases. Now they're up to over 400, but it's 144 cases of UFOs. They didn't specify a period of time. They said that one of them was identified, was a balloon. The other 143 were not. They obviously didn't do any work on this. And But what they did say was that some of these objects they're not Russian or Chinese. There's no evidence that they are. And it similarly said there was not evidence that these were black budget projects that we, the Americans, were making. So they said both of those things. They indicated that the performance of these objects was extraordinary and difficult, or maybe even impossible, probably difficult to explain. They said that they constituted an air safety hazard. And there's one other main point, but so they did make a number of statements about UAP, as they put it, that are definitely something you can take home and work with. They didn't give any particular specific information about any particular case. In fact, they haven't done that at all. When they spoke to Congress last spring, there was hardly any specific information that they gave on any cases. So they're still not doing that. You mentioned, is the attempt being made to explain these as foreign drones? And I don't know if the U.S. government's being that brazen. For the U.S. government to actually say that these are Chinese drones, like, for example, some of the encounters off 2019 and 2020 off the west coast of the U.S., off the California coast, some of those came out. A few videos were leaked to Jeremy Corbell, and other stories have come out. They're very dramatic encounters. And there were suggestions by, I think over at The Drive, they made a very strong argument that these were Chinese drones, which I do not believe for an instant. Not even for a nanosecond. Or Russian, give me a break. Not at all. And the U.S. government is not smart about a lot of things, but they're smart enough not to accuse the Chinese and Russians of those UAP. Because to do so would really escalate the drama that already has existed. I mean, my God, bridges have just been burned with these nations. But also it just, I don't think anyone actually believes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be
Chinese
a wise move to do that unless it was part of something else, hidden agenda, and all these other conspiracies that we could.
Well, it would be. I mean, it's almost certainly not true. First of all, especially with the Russians, not a chance, and the Chinese, not. And when you're talking about anything off the East Coast, it's even more not a chance. It's absolutely not happening.
So, in your belief, then. What is it? What exactly is happening?
It's not Chinese. It's not Russian. It's not any other foreign nation. I mean, go back to the 2004 Tic Tac. I mean, even more so with that. If you look at the history of Russia and China in 2004, I mean, their capabilities for both nations are vastly better today than they were in 2004. In 2004, people forget, but Russia still was trying to get into NATO in 2004. Believe it or not. Putin was trying year after year to get into NATO, and the West kept saying, nope, we'll get back to you. Nope. So no, Russia's relations with the West were much more cordial and positive at that time. And China was just in no position militarily, technologically, to do any of those things. And neither were the Russians, for that matter. Russian military started getting an overhaul around 2008, not before that. So no, not the Russians, not the Chinese. You're looking at the Tic Tac encounter of 2004. The only other thing, if you want to say conventional about it, would be a U.S. black budget secret project, which some people still speculate. But look, you're talking about something that Fravor saw that thing depart. It went out of his field of vision within 2 seconds, he said. And he stated that he had a perfect line of sight, not less than 10 miles and maybe as long as 50 miles. So if you even say 10 miles, 2 seconds in 10 miles is 18,000 miles per hour. All right. This thing was on the water. And by the way, there was another object below it, a fairly large submersible object that we don't really hear anyone talking about. But the Tic Tac object was above the water, and Fravor, famously circling around to see it. The thing circles to match him and then shoots up at him and zooms off at a speed approximately of 18,000 miles per hour or more. Now, I mean, if someone's going to argue that this is classified technology, okay, fine, be my guest, but at least do us the courtesy of having a hypothesis of what science and what scientific principles and what technologies are being used almost 20 years ago to do that. And by the way, we have a perennial case of historical amnesia when it comes to UFOs. So what we see with the Tic Tac UFO in 04, this is performance capabilities that the U.S. military has encountered for decades and decades before this. I have reports. Anyone can get these reports. U.S. declassified reports from the late 1940s describing military reports describing objects moving at speeds of excess of 10,000 miles per hour, essentially comparable to the Tic Tac in this century. So if we're going to start dredging up these claims that these are black budget secret programs, let's at least do people the courtesy of hypothesizing what is the program, what is the technology, other than just say magic, which I haven't heard anyone really give an explanation. So no, I think these are unexplained. And just to finish the thought, the more recent ones off the coast of California, 2019, 2020, I don't know what those were, but they were. We don't know where these things could have originated. There are not any good locations other than the only conventional explanation would be that this is a highly classified Navy or some kind of project originating off of Catalina Island. Maybe, but that would be very dramatic.
But still, it's still possible. See, I mean, there's belief, there's heavy belief, that it's this way, but we don't know for sure.
I think you can only argue it's heavy belief if someone closes their eyes and pretends there's no other UFO phenomenon going on in the world. I mean, the fact is, there's this phenomenon going around every day around the world.
Well, something is happening, and that's the thing. And the concern that I always have is like, I would rather take a statement from any government that says we're aware of what's going on and we have it handled. I would accept that. I don't need them to explain to me what it is. I just don't want to know that they don't have it handled, because if it is all of these things, I want to feel comfortable and trust that my government, can handle this. You're right. So where do you feel on that perspective? Do they know what it is, or do they not know what it is, and they're risking? Because there's risk by saying we don't know what it is, because then we as people don't trust our government.
Right. Exactly. Well, okay. So you're bringing up something. I mean, I'm literally trying to ask myself, when was the last time I actually trusted my government? And it's been many decades. So I have no faith. No faith in the United States government.
Could it be a boy who cried wolf?
Or the Canadian government, for that matter. I don't have any faith in the Canadian government, but certainly not the United States government. But the problem, in other words, I don't have faith that they have the will or the ability to handle this problem in a responsible way. I don't think that they do. Now, I mean, maybe that's not being fair. They've been confronted since the 1940s at the least with a phenomenon that is clearly totally beyond their capability to deal with. There's no way for them to deal with it. So let me give them a little more slack here and just say, put yourself in the position of the political leadership of the U.S. in the 1940s. So you're Harry Truman. Your generals say to you, hey, we've recovered some technology that doesn't seem to come from this civilization, and bodies and beings that don't look human. So you're given this incredible information. And how do you deal with that? Do you tell the world? I mean, you may want to, but I can guarantee your advisors will say, bad idea, sir. Yeah. You tell the world you've got this. Now you're going to let the Russians know that we got this exotic technology. We don't even want to share atomic weapons and technology with the Russians. We're sure as hell not going to share exotic tech like alien. So they're not going to do that. And they didn't do that. Instead, what they did is they played the denial game for as long as possible, and they're still playing it. And then the problem with UFO secrecy is that it develops its own momentum, its own power, and its own money. Right. I mean, this is technology that you're holding the future in your hands, and at least in principle. Why would you give that up? That's a lot of power. Yeah. You pass it off to your trusted people in industry, and you say, study this, and come up with something. Tell me what you've got. And I think that's a real moneymaker, and that's a lot of great ground floor investment opportunities too. So there's no incentive for giving this up. Also, the disruption of this phenomenon should never be underestimated. We all believe, I believe, and you believe, and I'm sure probably everyone, or just about everyone listening, thinks that, yes, we should have the truth out on this subject, and we ought to. But those people who've got this information, some of them at least are probably smart enough to realize this is a very disruptive subject. I mean, for a lot of reasons. First of all, they can't control it. So by acknowledging that this is real, politically speaking, that's a really dangerous thing to do, because when you acknowledge something's real, now you become the one responsible for dealing with it. And if you have no way of dealing with it, then now you've just got this albatross hanging around you that what do you do with that? You know, back in the 1970s, when cattle mutilations became a thing for the first time in public, like a really big thing. I mean, they'd been known since the late 60s, but it really kind of blew up in the mid 70s. And in the state of New Mexico, there was an independent, a state-sponsored study of mutilations. That was such a farce, frankly. And the conclusion was, well, it's just coyotes and natural predators and this type of thing. But the state of New Mexico could not possibly acknowledge that this was something beyond that, because they had no way of dealing with it. So you just deny. And that's where the United States has been, and the U.S. has dominating influence over most of the nations that we call the collective West, and that includes Canada, that includes the entire EU. The U.S. is the 500-pound gorilla that sits on top of everyone. So they're not going to say boo unless the United States national security state allows them to. That's a fact. We don't have a world of independent sovereign states like we think we do.
So then
it doesn't work like that.
So then it's handled, it's managed. So it has to be managed by something. So is it being managed by a government, or is it being managed by something else?
No, it's beyond a government, I would say.
Okay.
When I look at all the U.S. presidents, so we've got Biden now, we had Trump, we had Obama, you go all the way back. Presidents, they're either corporate financial team players, like, we'll start with Clinton, like Clinton was, George W. Bush was, Obama was, they're all corporate people. Trump was the outsider who was literally had to be taken out because not because he was racist or sexist or any of that stuff. He had to be taken out because he was not fully on board with the neocon and globalist projects. That's a fact. And that's why they went after him. Biden is, objectively speaking, probably the weakest U.S. president we've had since James Buchanan, which was the guy just before Lincoln, which led to the Civil War. Biden is completely run by the neocons in Washington. So these are people who are either literally puppets of puppet masters, or they have the gift, as Trump did, of just enraging everyone around them and being hated. So no, U.S. presidents, I think, do not. And plus, U.S. president cannot possibly manage the world of special access programs. There's just too many. There's probably hundreds of them. They are deeply, deeply secret, and they demand deniability in many cases by a president. The president's got to meet with the press, shake hands with the dignitaries, pose in front of the cameras and all of that. And when you're 80 years old, particularly as our president is, he doesn't. So who's running it is the question. Well, that's the $64 trillion question. Who's running it? I don't know. I think you've got some of these people probably go to Davos meetings, and they probably go to Bilderberg meetings. Some of them. Beyond that, I wouldn't hazard to say who the names are. I would guess at some point or another, someone like Henry Kissinger would be a yes for the program. Someone like George Bush Sr. has long been was believed to be deeply knowledgeable.
So it's interesting too. So it's still human control. It's still higher level human beings in a different category that are running it. So is there?
Well, as far as we know. I mean, look, we're in a hall of mirrors with this thing, right?
Yeah.
We're in a hall of mirrors.
So does UFOs mean ET, extraterrestrial? Does that mean?
To me, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That doesn't mean that there aren't weird things about it. It doesn't mean that they don't have access to highly exotic science. It doesn't mean that they don't know how to play games with space and time in ways that we don't know how. or at least we don't seem to. So they can do a lot of things that do seem magical. Now, look, there are definitely things about this phenomenon that seem beyond even extraterrestrial. Yeah, I would say that. Like, there are things about this. You look at places like some of the, like the famous Skinwalker Ranch, but there are other places that seem like potential portals as well, where there's bizarre activity. I know, we can talk about this. I know you've studied at least one of them in Canada. And so there are places where the barrier is between our reality and some other reality is thinner. Is that possible? And I think the answer is yeah, it is definitely possible. But that doesn't mean that we're not dealing with people or beings from another world or another planet. How they get here is a really good question, and we've got theories, but no, I could never ever rule out an extraterrestrial hypothesis to this. I think
it's just this is tough thought process, but the reason why I'm going through it is because I'm trying to understand the normality of it to try to get some sense of what's probable or what's likely. Yeah. You may not know for sure, but knowing, as you're a guy that measures patterns, you need to see patterns in data. I need to see the same thing. So these trends, like humans are predictable, people are predictable. And once you figure out the pattern and how it all works, we still don't have proof. We have a heavily suggested belief based on this pattern that's being exhibited, but they won't give us the proof. So if they don't give us the proof and ET does exist, are we in charge of the ET, or is the ET in charge of us?
Yeah.
Like, how do you imagine, based on a balance of probabilities, what is likely for how that relationship work?
Really good question. There's a lot of thoughts that I have with what you just said. But to answer your question specifically, I would say, well, let's just take a guess. We have a very good cognitive capacity. These brains of ours are pretty good. But if you look at the size of the head of a typical gray alien, you can see that they have a brain case that's probably larger than ours. They have a frontal capacity that seems to be much more significant than ours. And that would make me think that they have a vastly higher cognitive capacity. It would make me think they probably have a vastly greater telepathic and psi capability as well. I have this, my own personal theory is that our evolution is such that we have just reached a kind of cusp of genuine psi ability, where our brains and our, I don't know, I'm not a brain expert, but our neural activity is such that we achieve the level where we're able to perceive, space and time in ways that maybe lower animals can't. I say lower in terms of cognitive capability, but gray aliens or other types of aliens very well may have a much greater ability with that. So if they do, it would be likely that we would have a hard time competing with them if they're here. Now, they may not be here in large numbers where they can just, do, I don't know, an Independence Day blow them up scenario. Maybe they don't want to do that anyway. They probably don't. So they're here, they're doing their thing, and it seems to be pretty easy for them to go about what they want to do covertly.
We can't stop it. And I guess whoever's in control, what's going to happen. And what's happening is also through evolution in time is more of us have cell phones, more of us have access to document all these other things, and more of us are speaking out about it. So the scenario that I'm seeing happening is now the government has no choice but to react to it, because a big enough bell was rung. And if they don't do anything about it, the noise will continue. So like them covering it up, or at least being aware of it and making all these changes to now, have all these departments and do all these other things, is a nice strategy to give the people what they want, to say we're doing something. And now we have NASA, as you said, on board, and all these other things, other space agencies doing this, but getting prepared to release a report, which the current report is still missing, right? Where, what it is.
Yeah, right. That is still up. It's about a month late now.
So I would wager, or I would predict that with the pattern that I've seen and understanding the business of it all, it would be beneficial for them to come back with that report and say, we've done what you've asked and they don't exist, because that will be the end of the line, because we can't ask those questions anymore because they fulfilled the task. And if
they may try that. I think they'll continue to slow walk this as long as possible.
What do you think that report's missing? Why is that report not? What's the story behind the deadline?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't hazard a guess just because I don't have any inside contact on that. But there's a couple of reasons why it could be. You're dealing with a bureaucracy. You're probably dealing with people who are definitely not experts on the subject. I would seriously doubt that you've got any genuine experts making that report. You've got people who are probably knocking on doors of various military agencies, and it's unclear how much cooperation they're actually getting. We don't know. I do know, like 30 years ago, when the U.S. Congress was investigating Roswell in the early 1990s, they got unbelievable levels of obstruction from the U.S. Air Force for that. I mean, really significant obstruction. The Air Force just did not cooperate with Congress on that investigation. So, I mean, that's a real possibility. Just because, a law is passed and this agency is obligated to produce a report does not mean that every agency that they deal with to get their information is going to cooperate in a timely fashion.
Right.
So that's one possibility. I'm just guessing. I don't
know.
And if
they're delaying it, it's the why too. So are they delaying it because it's a secret and they need more time to cover it up, or are they delaying it because there's so many other problems to worry about and this just isn't important to them? Because,
well, I suspect that there's a conflict of interest going on. I think we've been looking at a power struggle on this matter going on for more than 5 years now. So I think when we started getting some, let's call it small d disclosure, some of the information coming out, that was the result of a faction within the Pentagon that did want to promote, the TTSA faction and those guys, and did, for their reasons, want to promote some UFO openness. I don't know if they want to do full-blown disclosure. The thing is, within the Pentagon, there have always been factions that have promoted UFO openness. You go back to the 1950s. There were definite factions within the military that wanted this. All you have to do is read books by Donald Kehoe or Edward Ruppelt, and they lay this out. They actually do talk about this. So there have always been groups that have tried to push for some openness on this subject, and there have similarly been, they typically run into big, tall brick walls on the matter, and they get so far, and then they can't go any farther. And I think that's kind of what we're dealing with today. I think we're looking at a kind of a reboot of that long-standing issue. So I think we're looking at a behind-the-scenes little battle here. And in fact, guys like people like Lou Elizondo has essentially said as much anyway. He talked about supervisors in the DOD who were absolutely out to sabotage the work that he did relating to UFOs, UAP. He's talked about that. So as to why it's delayed, I don't know, but I would say that there's very likely to certainty that high enough up in the power structure, there's going to be a word that comes down and says we're going to give Congress and the public as much as we have to, and not an ounce more. And how much do they have to give? Not that much.
And how are we able to verify that what they gave us and what actually exists or not? We don't know.
Well, we haven't been able to verify anything so far. They've given us no data.
To trust them, though. We're forced to trust that they give us the truth when we ask for it.
Yeah.
It's hard.
This is a government that's lied about every important matter in my lifetime that I can think of here at age 60. So no, the U.S. government does not have a good track record of being honest on pretty much anything.
The likely scenario is that it's not going to go anywhere. Now, if it happens,
that's what I would say. I would say it's probably not going to go, not at least on the initiative of the U.S. government.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need more time and blah blah blah. And so now let's just imagine this is a fantasy, and they say yes, all this stuff exists. In your opinion, and I know you've written a book about it, but a current opinion, what happens after disclosure?
Well, yeah, now that's a fascinating subject, and that is what my co-author Bryce Sable and I spent an entire book trying to unpack. And we wrote that book over 12 years ago. Wow, it just blows my mind. How does 12 years ago feel like an entire lifetime? But it does. It's like the before times. And back then, but I think that we got most of it right. I will say that. I think a couple of things that we didn't see, but what I think, just to answer your question, what would happen? Mm-hmm. So if the United States president were to make an announcement and to say something like this, turns out, folks, I just learned that UFOs are real. Wow, I had no idea. And some of them don't seem to come from our civilization. So if he were to say something like that, I used to make a joke years ago. I'd say, well, one thing he can't do, one thing he would love to do but can't do, is say, well, that's all I got for you. I'm going to take a 6-month vacation. See ya. Because there would be a lot of follow-up questions. Yeah. People would be asking. It's like, whoa, wait, what? Aliens are real? Do we have anything to worry about? So there's a lot of questions are going to happen that a president or any world leader is going to have a very difficult time dealing with. Mm-hmm. The first question people are going to ask is, do we have anything to worry about? Are these aliens friend or foe? That's clearly going to be the first question. The next question, and how do you answer that, by the way? Because, I mean, what is the answer to that? What if you've got multiple groups? I think that there are multiple groups here. Mm-hmm. I think that humanity right now is the greatest show in this quadrant of the galaxy. Us. I think we're with the action. We're jumping into a new phase of existence. I'm not sure it's a good phase, by the way, but who cares what I think? It's happening whatever I think. And we're leaping into their world, and we're doing it. You realize just over 100 years ago, we didn't even have cars. We didn't have electricity. Just about 150 years ago. Yes. And suddenly, in this fast, cosmically, we're having this conversation, video in different countries, and we've landed things on Mars, and we've sent probes out of the solar system. Good grief. So this has all been fast. So I think what we've done is we've drawn in any group that is able to observe us is doing it big time right now, because we're the show. And I think we're interesting. So I think we're dealing with more than one group. And so if you're the president or the prime minister, how do you tell your country what is actually going on, and how much can you tell? And then the other question some people may want to ask is, whoa, how have you lied to us all this time? When did you actually find out? You telling me all these UFO people have been right? Are there abductions? Do you have classified technology? Do you have alien craft? Do you have the Roswell craft hidden in Area 51 or somewhere else? Like, all of these questions are going to come through. And then here's another thing. We are in an era now in which you and I are not allowed or not supposed to believe in conspiracy theories. We're told this every single day. Well, you tell me, what's a bigger conspiracy theory than UFOs? Is there anything that's bigger? So can you imagine a president somewhere in the collective West
answer that question
saying, don't believe in those other conspiracies, but yeah, actually UFOs are real? It's like, wait, what? People are going to be wondering, what else have you lied about? Yeah. At least some people will. So it's a really difficult political question. It's the most difficult political question.
And it would make sense for them to hesitate. It would make sense for them not to want to give it up, but that means it's handled, because there's not going to be a consequence to them not telling us the truth unless they have control and they want us to know.
And you expressed some very, very laudable notions a little while ago about wanting to trust your government. And yeah, I would like to trust my government too. I don't think that's ever going to happen again, but I would like to be able to do that. And the thing though is, it's very, very important for everyone listening to understand that our ability to question and challenge our government on matters like this has got an expiration date on it. I don't know exactly what that date is, but it's got an expiration date on it. And I think this is relevant for ufology, which is that we are definitely, I cannot say this strongly enough, in the middle of a worldwide global revolution. I think we can all feel it. But what I don't hear is a lot of comprehensive analysis about the nature of it. But we are in a, I mean, I think COVID kind of amplified it and sped things up dramatically, but it was already happening. But now it's really happening.
I think COVID set an example of how we would react to a global threat. And I think the response to how we reacted to that could add to the hesitation as to why they want to tell us that UFOs may exist.
Well, I think of it as a test run or a dry run, a rehearsal, and basically a bunch of trial balloons put up by governments to see how far they could go with a lot of draconian measures, and turns out they can go pretty darn far. What I'm suggesting is that how long will it be? I mean, we've already seen the radical restriction of what people are allowed to say on a whole range of subjects. And I don't think that's going to get any better. I think it's going to get worse. I think I'm not going to get into the whole worldwide political situation with you because I don't want to ban your channel. But I will say that
thank you.
the war that is happening is going to, how do I put this gently, backfire so badly on the West. And it's going to, I've been saying this for a while, it will prompt further dramatic crackdowns on freedom to assemble, free speech in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, and all the collective Western nations. So I think we're staring down the barrel of a gun right now that is ready to take out the last of our freedom of expression. I think so. That's what I believe. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong, but I don't think that's.
Okay, so I have one more question that should take us to the commercial break, and then we're going to switch gears on the second half here. So paying attention to what you've said and coming back full circle here, you said you don't trust your government and you want to trust your government, but you're not there. And I agree, and I feel that way sometimes and all these other things. So my question to you personally, that day happens, president comes out and says UFOs exist. Will you trust that president is telling you the truth, or will you not believe them?
Well, trust really isn't the issue for me. So what I would do, and I tell this to people about me, I say, don't trust me. Hell, don't ever trust me. Trust facts. Trust the data. So if the U.S. president were to say that UFOs are real, my belief would be predicated on how well does what he have to say accord with what I think I already know. So I'll be watching his statements very carefully.
So it's not so much the answer; it's how he explains, or she, because it could be in the future, way down the road. But how they explain the reasoning behind it, I guess that would make sense to me.
Yeah, it would be the data that comes out and how well it's explained, and so all of that would have to be factored in. Yeah, I would want to see what are the details. What's the facts? What do you have? How long have you known? What are the beings like? And so on. What they will probably want to do is, there's many layers. I know you got to go to a break. You have to go to break right now. I don't want to.
Well, let's take it now, and then we'll finish.
Sure, yeah.
Or finish your thought. Finish your thought. Go ahead.
Well, there's just many layers of truth that can be given. And the question is, what's the layer that you stop at? So do you say, yeah, UFOs are real, and then just say, well, and we're going to figure out the rest? Well, that may not work because people may have a hard time believing that you don't know anything else. So, the question that a president will have is, how little can I say and still be credible? That's going to be the question. Do you go out and say, yeah, actually they abduct people. Oh yeah, and by the way, they walk among us, and some of them look like us. Like, what if that's true? Do you go there? These are difficult questions, and I don't know if there's easy answers.
And maybe that's why this report's taking forever, because they need to answer all those questions.
Well, no, they're not answering those questions.
I hope it's still possible. Okay, so we'll pause right here, but we'll continue after a message from our sponsor, so the Experiencers Support Association. If you are listening to the audio-only version, remember, head over to youtube.com/the Experiencers Support Association so you see the video that goes with this audio. You're listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencers Support Association. I'm sitting here with Richard Dolan for our Season 4 finale, and we will be back in 5 minutes.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis.
All right, welcome back. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Have you ever experienced an unexplained event involving the paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrial, dogman, or any other paracryptid? head over to our website, experienceyoursupport.org, and submit a report. Let the others who have already reported be that example that proves we are making a difference. And if it wasn't for these reports, we would not be able to do what we do. And for that, we thank you. And if you're wondering where you can get a hat like this that I'm wearing today, please visit www.tinfoilcap.co. Every purchase goes to support the Leak Project from Rex Bear. Thank you so much, Rex, for this hat. All right. Can't believe that hour went by so quick.
It blew my mind. It was so fast.
I was so anticipating this all day.
Hey, you know what? It was nice to hear my little promo of your work in the during the break. That was kind of cool to hear that.
I kind of snuck that in for a while there. So now that you hear it, do you remember that 4 years ago? Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I remember we talked about it. I didn't remember saying what I said, but I remember what we talked about. Yeah.
Do you still feel that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't edit the photos and videos, especially.
And especially, exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. This is where I wanted to switch gears too, is because what we just talked about is what everybody knows about and what everybody's interested in. But what brought us together was this concept and idea of paranormal and consciousness being connected to the ET phenomenon. And that was a theory that I had then, and I've worked on it and shared my work with you and all these other things over the years. And now we're here. So in your opinion, now with what you know, where does this word paranormal fit in terms of everything we just talked about for the last hour?
I think, what a great question. I think we as human beings, we have certain advantages and certain maybe permanent liabilities or handicaps. Maybe not permanent, probably not permanent. But what was it? An old expression. But a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? It's like we're able to try to go for certain things, but we can't quite get them. And one of those things is what we call the paranormal. Because we typically perceive reality with the senses that we know of, but there is a sixth sense. There's a psi sense. I am certain, just as you are, that it exists. But the question is, how exact does it perceive, and how well do we perceive? I guess what I'm getting at is, I think if that sense were stronger in us, a lot of what we consider to be paranormal probably would seem perfectly normal to us, but we're not quite there. It's like, if you have an animal in your house and you leave the house to go to work, your creature doesn't know where you're going because it's a dog or it's a cat. Like they don't know these things because they can't. Their brains work in a certain way, and they, if they were to ponder it, it would be a mystery to them. They would have no idea. And that's kind of the case with us at a bit of a higher level. We experience things that we can't fully grasp. So I guess what I'm saying is, UFOs do fit in the paranormal bucket in a sense, because there are things about this phenomenon that we don't fully know how to explain. We're getting there in a lot of ways, like in terms of the physics of how these craft might operate. There's some pretty good theories out there in terms of how a Tic Tac UFO can instantly accelerate to 10 or 20,000 miles per hour without leaving an exhaust trail or heat signature. We do have theories about that, and they may turn out to be true. But there's other things about this that are just really, really advanced. You have what's been called the Oz effect for many, many years. That is, there's a strangeness that happens to people a lot of times when we have these encounters. Not just missing time, but that's one of them. But it's like time can slow down, or things seem weird, or beings can come through walls. And how does all of this work? Are they able to just do this through very advanced physics, or are they interdimensional beings in ways that we don't even understand what that means? I don't know. But I think there's a good chance that there's a dimension of reality that we don't really understand, because we probably can't. It's probably just at the edge of our understanding. Or maybe
And if they say UFOs exist, then that exists too.
if UFOs exist, then
all this paranormal possibilities that we think of exist as well.
Well, I guess it depends. The devil's in the details. Does that mean ghosts exist? Well, there, you could have a whole argument separately on ghosts and EVP and things like that. I actually do believe ghosts exist, just as a personal matter. I had an experience when my father passed away, and at that very moment, lights in my house just went on and off, on and off, on and off, nonstop.
Well,
150 miles away. And then 15 minutes later, my sister called and said, "Hey, our dad died 15 minutes ago." It's like, whoa. I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, you can tell me what you think, but I think that was my father somehow figuring out a way through consciousness, getting in my wiring and saying, "Hey, Richie, look over here."
Or perhaps,
I think that's what he did.
Perhaps you were very upset and thought and worried about it, and you expelled the energy and the lights flickered because you felt it at the same time.
Well, maybe if I felt it, it was at a very unconscious level because I didn't know that he had died. So, but I mean, I got a few other stories like that in my family. My point is, I do believe in things like that, and I don't know how to explain it. Like
Right.
I wouldn't know how to explain how did my father go across the New York State Thruway at instantaneous and know where my house was and know where my wiring was and know exactly how to get my attention. I don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know that one. So, but to say that UFOs are real, yeah, I mean, would it say that the rest of the paranormal is real? Maybe it could lead to it.
Let me clarify. They would have to say UFOs exist and they're associated with extraterrestrials beyond our whatever. But if they say UFOs exist and it's our technology, then that wouldn't link. I don't think that would justify an explanation for paranormal as well.
Well, yeah, it would also be very difficult to sell that to researchers like myself and probably many people, because that would be that's a big ask to have people believe that, because it requires that we forget that there was a whole 20th century history of UFOs and a long history of declassified documents that prove that the U.S. military had been scratching their heads and been very concerned, gravely concerned about some of these events. So the U.S. government would have to explain how they've been playing these types of games with their own military for 80 plus years.
Or they have to explain that they've been working with them this whole time, and then have to explain what we get in return for doing that, and
also how to explain. Were you playing games in South African airspace in the 1950s, or in Russian airspace in the 1970s and 80s, or before that, or Japan, or the Middle East, or Europe? I mean, or South America. I mean. It's a huge thing for the United States to say, yeah, it's our secret project. There's a lot of credibility that they'd have to overcome. Now, look, we have dumbed down the education level of this world to such an extent. I mean, I hate to sound cynical, but there's not a lot of education on this, or really on many topics, frankly, and there is in certain ways, there's a lot of passivity, frankly, among the population. But there still would be a lot of people who would have a hard time accepting that explanation from the U.S. government. Now, they may not care. They may get to a point where they're able to lock down the internet to an extent where they don't have to worry about people like myself or yourself or anyone else. They might just be able to get away with what they want. I've said this for years. I think it's like a foot race between our elites, we can call them that, and us, and whoever gets to the finish line first wins. So if we get to the finish line first, that means we have a leak or an exposure. Let's say exposure rather than disclosure. We expose them information that they cannot deny. That wins the game. That's a checkmate for us. If they get to the finish line first, that means that they get to lock down the internet sufficiently and control the flow of information sufficiently so that researchers like ourselves, we can talk to her blue in the face, but it may not matter. So that's the game that they're trying to play, I suspect.
So I'm going to kind of lead into the experiencer part in the sense, because this is the Experiencer Support Association, of course.
It's very important, very important.
And we are talking about the reality of the way that it is. But for those who have had experiences that want to get that, as much as we want to get that answer, and if we're not going to get it, then individuals like us who have the attention of people have the ability to encourage the same people that want the answers on how to survive knowing this information. Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, what is your message to those experiencers that are having these phenomenons? They're not going to get this answer as what we so desperately want to have, but how do we survive, or how do we move on so we just forget about it and we're not waiting for it and just—
It's a great question.
And just raise the vibration,
Great question. Well, there's a few things. So one thing that I don't think we can do is stop these other beings from doing things to us if we don't want them to. Now, I may be wrong. There are people who have argued that you can banish them through,
psychic ability.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to Christian UFO researchers who maintain, like, you invoke Jesus and the beings will go away. I've had long conversations with people like the late Bud Hopkins who said, nope, I don't think that's the case at all. These beings do whatever they want to do. So I don't know about that. I don't think that we're strong enough to stop them. I mean, one thing that they clearly have the ability to do is engage in cognitive manipulation of people that they take. And they do this over and over and over again. I mean, you hear this so often, it's a cliche. So someone will say, I felt really tired, or I felt really happy, or I felt intense love coming from this being that I'd never met before that somehow loved me. Like, none of that stuff makes sense, but the emotions are clearly being manipulated there. And the cognition is also manipulated in terms of memory, obviously. So we're really at a tough spot competing with them on that basis. But there's other things we can do. I don't think we should expect honesty coming from our own political leadership. And besides, what could they possibly do anyway? But one thing, there's a couple of things we can do. One is we can try to understand what's happening. And another thing we can do is to try to talk about this with other people who've had these experiences, because I do think that's very, very important, psychologically and emotionally. Because the thing that we have to do as human beings is we want to know that we are still sovereign of ourselves. We still want to know that we have our own agency, our own power within ourselves. And, the fact is, throughout all of human history, human beings have dealt with forces that are certainly beyond their ability to control. I mean, whether it's alien abduction or the fall of Rome or anything else you can think of, things have happened beyond the scope of ability of people to stop. We can't stop bad things from happening to ourselves, but we can. Absolutely, we have the ability to determine our reaction to it. We have the ability to be sovereign of our mind. That I do believe, and it helps by meeting other like-minded people. And another thing that we can do is be unafraid to talk about it, first of all, with other people and with ourselves, actually, with other people. And as time goes on, with friends and with associates who might be understanding. And then as more time goes on, maybe some people will have the courage to speak publicly about what they've gone through. And I think all of that's important, because one thing that we can do is affect our culture. If we cannot affect our politics immediately, which again, I wonder what could they do anyway, but we can affect our culture, and we can at least do what we can to make it so that people don't feel so isolated and so atomized. I mean, you think about the trauma that is involved. Now, not all experiences are, not everyone believes that their experience is a horrible thing, but for some people they do. For some people they absolutely do. And you think about the trauma that they feel. This thing happens to them that they can't understand, that keeps them awake at night. They can't fall asleep without the lights being on, or without a lot of loud noise in their room, because they're so psyched out by what happened. And it goes on for their entire life. All right. This messes them up. And on top of that, they can't talk to anyone about this. If you were the victim of any other kind of a crime, you could tell people. But alien abduction, that's a tough one. Even now, even in 2022, that's real hard for people to talk about. And it's so intensely personal. And sometimes the things that happen during that procedure are deeply, deeply upsetting to them. And so the one thing that we can do for these people is let them know, hey, you're not alone, and other people have experienced this, and we do understand, and we are here for you. And we have a shoulder to cry on if that's what you need, or someone to listen to, or we can try to puzzle this out and think it out together and figure out what the hell just happened to you. Like, all of those are valuable. All of those things are valuable. Even if we can't stop them, if we can't do that, we can do these other things. And those things matter.
And that is basically the founding principles of the Experiencer Support Association is creating. I had that assessment then, as with all the bad stuff we talked about, all the guilt and stuff I had with just focusing on UFOs and not focusing on the people, all those struggles I had that you talked me through to focus on the people and all these other things, that gets carried through. And our motto with the Experiencer Support Association is, you're not alone, we believe you.
Yeah, it's important. It's really important that you do this.
And
it's valuable.
And there's other people that provide those supports as well. But what's important is that the experiencer at least feels comfortable and validated enough to be heard. And the challenge is giving them advice and answers in order to explain what's happening, which is why this disclosure part is important, because that's a source where we should get that information from.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, you know, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's pointless to do that. It's not pointless to try. Look, the thing is, we live in a society where, in theory, the government is responsible to us, the citizens. That's the theory. That's the concept. Now, in reality, maybe not so much, but in theory, it is. And for me, that's not something I'm willing to let go of. And so what I say is, it's of paramount importance that we do everything we can to hold our governments accountable for the truth on this subject. Because otherwise, we're just rolling over and giving up, and basically saying, yeah, it's a total authoritarian society, and posing as democratic, but it's really not. See, we don't want to do that.
Well, these are big world, big scale problems. So what we want when we're fighting for disclosure is a universal global answer to cater to the entire population of this earth. But as an experiencer, they may not need disclosure. They just need to be believed because it's their personal experience. So if they believe it to be true and they're living a life, positive actions and things like that, do they really need disclosure? And if we are able to take care of the people to help them feel comfortable with their experiences, to share that information. So you're now getting into experiencer testimony. Have you learned through focusing on the people more information from them than you do from the government? Like what's a better source for you?
Oh, well, in terms of experiencers, I don't think we really learn anything from the government. It's all from the people, all of it. You know, and by the way, there's a lot of folks who have said for years, I don't need the government to disclose anything to me. I know the truth. And, you know, I hear this a lot, and I understand that. I totally get it. The reason I think disclosure still is important is because I don't want to live in a society where my government is so opaque and so secretive that it's basically made a mockery of the ideals that I still want to believe in, you know, government of the people. So that's why it's important for me. But your other question, wow, was a really good point. The heck did you just say? Now I'm trying to remember exactly where you just left off. But you had a really good thing to say there. In terms of learning from experiencers.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I've been learning from experiencers now for over 20 years. I mean, since I've been a public person in the UFO field, which really started in late 2000, early 2001, I guess. Yeah, I've talked to people who've had experiences, abductions, and other encounters for many, many years. I've collected hundreds of those just personally that have come to me alone. I have a large file of them, and in fact, recently I've been reviewing them again, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. And on top of that, I've spoken to hundreds more whose cases I didn't write down. So I learn from people all the time, and what I'm struck by is there's a lot of consistency and there's a lot of variation. There's both. So there's consistency includes telepathic communication, and includes definite cognitive manipulation and control. I say manipulation. I could just say control. Maybe that's a better word. I don't know. In other words, and also I see a lot of cases of this phenomenon starting out when the person is a child, like 5-6 years of age, type of thing, or even younger sometimes. So that definitely is. Those are all recurring patterns. I've talked to people who've had experiences with totally alien-looking beings, and I've talked to individuals who've had experiences with totally human-looking beings, but who do all the things that the aliens do. So they've got the telepathy going, and they've got the mind manipulation and control going, and they have very, very advanced technology. So human and non-human, going back at least to the early 1950s. Some of the folks I've talked to were children in the early 50s, and they describe these things to me. So, and I guess what I would say also is there, there's a definite interest by these other beings in aspects of our biology and also of our mind. We hear all too frequently about their interest in our reproduction and our sexuality. And I think, yes, absolutely, that is true. But there's more than that. There's, I sometimes get the impression that they're doing like a long-term monitoring of us. Maybe they're monitoring toxins in our system. Maybe they're monitoring our psychological capabilities or our mental capabilities or our psi capabilities. All of those are possible to me. And I think they're definitely interested in extracting our DNA. I think our DNA, this is just a thought, but our DNA could be quite lucrative on the interstellar market for all I know. So maybe they're taking some of that. I mean, one amazing thing about Earth, let's not forget, I mean, yes, there's probably a lot of life in the universe, sure, but that doesn't mean that most planets are like Earth. Probably most planets are not anywhere near as cool as Earth is. We have an unbelievable superabundance of life. We have a very large moon that has helped us in the stability of our climate, and also in a lot of other interstellar dangers that I probably don't know about. Like the moon's really been like, that's a nice roll of the dice for us. So, and we're in the Goldilocks zone. So even if an alien species wants to extract precious metals from another world, even for them, it's probably nicer to come to Earth because they're not going to boil, they're not going to freeze. It's not like being on Pluto. So we have a lot of attractions. Plus, we have Homo sapiens that we're not like any other species that's ever existed on this planet. I mean, that's just the reality. We the light bulb went on in our consciousness a little more than 60,000 years ago, I believe, around the time that we developed art, music, ritual, advanced weaponry, and very advanced stoneworking. Like all of that happened around that time. So something significant happened to our species mentally. And ever since then, we're kind of like an artificial species. We don't just use fire. We don't just use spears. We use all kinds of technology. And we've created an artificial world that has supplanted the natural world that we live in, that we evolved in. Now we're now evolving in an artificial world, an unnatural world. You have to wonder how that's going to affect our evolution moving forward. And now, considering the fact that we're directing our own evolution through CRISPR and other genetic manipulation. What are we even going to look like? My point in saying all of this is, we're pretty damned interesting to any alien species that's come here. People all too frequently play us down, and they'll say silly things like, what could super intelligent aliens have to do with human beings? We must be like ants to them. And I'm like, no, I don't think so at all. I think we are leapfrogging over ourselves, as it were, and we're leaping into their world, and we're probably coming to a plateau. We haven't reached it yet, but that's what the last 200 years of science and technology have led, and it's leading us now to transhumanism, and it's leading us into very strong artificial intelligence, quantum computing, nanotech, 5G, 6G, total surveillance, a surveillance state where privacy is a thing of the past, and we're turning into a hive mentality. Like, you can see it happen all around you. So we're turning into something totally different, and that's going to be of great interest to any species.
So many thoughts came in here, but I'm just trying to direct this. But let's throw another theory onto this table. And how do we incorporate time travel in all of this? Because there are some theories that perhaps these grays are an evolution of human beings, and from the future coming back to the past and altering all these other things. And that could exist as well in this whole mix of things, because we can't say one doesn't exist without the other.
Yeah.
So how would you factor time travel in the mix of all of this stuff we're trying to unravel?
I just gotta say, I love these
On
questions.
the TinFoil hat, by the way.
I feel like I should have a beer. I'm drinking water with electrolytes. We should be at a bar having a beer.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say about time travel.
Conversations got us in trouble. Remember that.
That's right.
Those were good times.
That's right.
We can't talk about that stuff here, though.
Well, I would say I do have a thought or two about time travel. I would say that if time travel ever were to happen, it could not happen in one dimension of reality. So let me just explain. So let's say we wanted to go back in time and, I don't know, kill baby Hitler. Everyone wants to do that. Or do something else in the past. It doesn't really matter. For you to go back in time would mean you're not just going back in time on Earth in your city or wherever. You have, because what is time? What is a moment? One way you might define a moment in time is the position of every single thing with every other thing in the universe at that moment, because it's all in transit. So like that includes the cells in your body, that includes the position of the Earth in relation to the sun, the position of the sun in relation to the center of the galaxy, the position of our galaxy in relation to all of our galaxies. Like all of that is in constant changing and never to be repeated ever again, ever, once it happens. So to truly go back in time in this dimension that we live in would mean you'd have to rewind the entire universe back to that moment in time. And that just can't be possible. That cannot be possible. So instead, what might be possible is you have like an infinite number of dimensions, like some people theorize. There's a theory that there are membranes, or brains for short, membrane, that's the boundary of this dimension of reality. And like 6 inches from your nose is actually another dimension that you can't see it, but it's you. And it's, there's one theory that every single decision you make splits off into an alternate universe, because there's a choice. There's a universe in which you didn't do that thing. And what's that universe? And so it just goes on infinitely. If that's true, I don't know if that's true, but if that's true, the multiverse, right? You could theorize that maybe you could go into someone else's universe if you could figure out how to go back in time. Like, I don't know how that would be possible. I mean, there's theories about Einstein, Rosenberg theory and all that.
Spending a lot of time invested in it. And what I'm trying to get at is what if these extraterrestrial beings are from another place in time? And then what they're doing is altering us to change the future. because they would have to see so far ahead. They would be so intelligent enough to be able to predict, and they have the capability of doing all these other things. They may have the capability of manipulating time. So to rationalize it, maybe they're coming back and affecting us to change the future.
I don't know how that would be. If that's the case, I can't say that I understand how that would happen scientifically. It doesn't mean it's not true. There are theories that could make time travel happen, I suppose. I mean, faster than, we've all heard this. You go faster than light. We don't know how to do that, but let's say we figure out a way, we go faster than light. You circle the earth a few times. In theory, you'd be going back in time. How that actually works in reality is beyond me. I don't know.
Well,
I'm not sure.
In order for that to work, that, like you said, we would have to rewind. And in order to rewind, there would have to be a storage facility that holds the data that already exists. So what this show right now is live. This data is being created in the moment, but it's not until we're done that you can go back and watch the replay. So technically, we're going back in time, in real time, to see something that's happened in the past. It's been documented. So in order for this to be possible, that would mean we're living in a machine. And there's, like, what are your thoughts on this? The whole simulation, because you talk about artificial intelligence. So are we in a machine?
We've all wondered. I've wondered it many times. I've wondered many times. Are we in a simulation?
And that would make sense, because then time travel could exist because it's documented, and then there's some controllers, as we just talked about, and then boom, they're not going to tell us any of that stuff, because if we find out that we're being controlled and manipulated in a simulation.
I've gone back and forth. Here's why. A simulation like that could explain some very odd things, maybe, about the phenomena that we study. It could. I was just, I listened to what some physicists have to say about this, and the problem I think that the most of them have with it is that when they are studying the most minute elements of our reality, you're getting out to quarks and Higgs bosons and all of that stuff. It's extremely detailed and extremely minute, and the relationships at this level of the subatomic reality is just so consistent and sophisticated, and it just seems a bit of a stretch to say that all of this is simulation. The physical laws, in other words, that scientists have discovered and have utilized are of such a consistency that it would seem to mitigate against the idea of a simulation hypothesis. I'm not qualified to really say anything beyond that, because I don't have the credentials or the knowledge, mainly. But I've listened to people who do have that knowledge and do have those credentials, and that's the kind of thing that they say, and it strikes me as credible. So I don't think that I believe we're in a simulation. I've listened to Elon Musk say, what was his statement? I think we have a 1 in a billion chance that we're living in base reality. I think it's a lot higher than 1 in a billion. And I think we probably do. We live in the base reality. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. I've listened to both sides. Nick Bostrom, who came up with simulation theory, and a lot of other folks. They're really smart. They have a lot of good points to make. So I can't say that I know.
Where do you sit on? And no, this is good. This is a good thought. I'm picking your brain because it's beyond the tinfoil hat. We go all over the place and see how deep dive we can get.
Yeah, aptly titled program.
Yeah. And this is part of my investigative mind too, of course, the analytical brain. So your position on what happens when we die. What happens then? See, I'm layering these.
I'm having such a fun time with this conversation. I love talking.
Why you want to have that beer? Because we've gone down this rabbit hole before.
I love talking about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
In my life, I've gone through the whole gamut of beliefs. I've went through everything that you could imagine. I think I probably believed it at one point or another. Said this a few times. I don't want to repeat myself, but I had a kind of an intellectual opening when I was in my early 20s. At the time, I thought I was an atheist back then, but I had a dog. Dog is a good way to cure some things that are wrong with you. And this dog, so I was feeding my dog. I think I was like 21, 22. And my dog knew exactly what was happening. He sees me get a can of dog food and he's getting all excited. And I was watching him eat and I thought, well, he's very intelligent. Like he knew I was about to feed him. He knows me. He knows a lot of things that I'm not even aware of, and sounds and smells. But he doesn't know how that food got into the can. That can of dog food. He doesn't know how we manufacture dog food because he's a dog. He doesn't know. There's a lot of things my dog just did not know. And I thought, well, gee, Richard, you think you're so smart. Your dog's at this level. You're at this level. What's at this level? What's at that level? What's beyond your ability to understand? And at that moment, I realized for me to think that I was an atheist, just because I could not at that moment get absolute scientific proof for what I felt I deserved. That's kind of prideful of myself. A lot of what the Greeks would have called hubris, And I thought, okay, so just chill out and be open. That doesn't mean be, what do they say? Don't be so open that your brain falls out, but at least be open to evidence. And so I've tried to be open to evidence the whole rest of my life. It's been almost 40 years since then. And what do I think? I can't say that I know. But I do think that we have what ancients called a soul. I do think that we have a non-locality to a certain element of our existence. So to our consciousness. I mean, I'm married to a remote viewer who literally, as a remote viewer in Canada, saw something in live time through the eyes of someone who at that time was in Tampa, Florida, 3,000 miles away from her. Been well documented. It was an amazing thing. How the hell is that possible? How do you do that? How do you get outside of your own body, your own consciousness into someone else's? And she's not the only one who's done this. You've had remote viewers who have been able to see across not just space, but time, seemingly. It's happened. So I think what that means is that there's a part, it may say things about the nature of reality, but it also says something about the nature of us and what our capabilities are. So we have something that's very, very special, that's very precious and beautiful and special and powerful. And I don't think we fully understand it. We don't really fully understand who and what we are as human beings and what our capabilities are. But those capabilities do include some version of non-locality. And look, I've just, I've tried to familiarize myself with stories of apparent reincarnation, of apparent survival of death, near-death experiences and the like. I spoke to a man over 25 years ago. This guy was a plumber. He was a regular dude, regular guy. And back then I was meeting with him because I wrote his professional resume. I used to write thousands of professional resumes for job seekers. And I was meeting with this guy just one-on-one. And he says, yeah, I flatlined at a hospital table here in Rochester for 10 minutes. I was dead. I was clinically dead. And he described his near-death experience to me. And he said, I didn't go through the tunnel, but I had a total life review. And he said, this is the crazy thing. He said, you're not going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I saw my entire life. 10 minutes, not long enough. So it didn't matter. I saw my whole life. And he said, not only did I see my whole life, but I saw it from not just my perspective at the time, but from the perspective of other people that I was with. And he said, and if I may say, from the perspective of God. He said, don't ask me how. I don't know. But I saw everything. And I didn't want to come back. But I'm back, and here I am, and I don't fear death ever again. I'm not afraid of it. And that was this guy. Mm-hmm. And by the way, a few years later, he came to my house to do some HVAC work, and it was nice seeing him again. But how many times have we heard this type of thing? Many. Mm-hmm. So I think there's something there beyond the veil. Yes, I do. And what I don't have knowledge, but I have a faith, and my faith would be that when we shed this mortal coil that we all have to do, that we are going to go somewhere, and that where we go is going to be somewhat contingent, maybe very contingent, on the manner in which we comport ourselves while we're here now. I think I do believe that. That's my faith. And I have a few other things that I believe in. I will just say I've come to have a definite spirituality in my life. It's very important to me, actually. I don't talk a lot about it specifically, but it's definitely a big part of my life, and I'm glad.
That's good. Thank you for answering that. Because like another thing too is like, so you've read my UFO reports, so you've seen how I've done that. That's how we got introduced, and
they're very well done.
Thank you.
That's why I really took an interest in your work, because it was very thorough, very good.
Now, back at the beginning, I was doing that work for UFOs, but then I had this theory about all this stuff that we just talked about. Since then, I've collected enough data with experiencers, and I'm working on an experiencer report of a 4-year study that would be able to prove through my research this timeline of contact and evolution over the years and all these different experiences and indexes that could heavily suggest, according to my belief in my studies, that there is a place, which I labeled the ultra spectrum, that we all have capabilities of reaching, whether that's via remote viewing or a seance or a CE5. These are all methods that the human being decides to use to reach this state of consciousness, to receive and deliver information to this space, which I call the ultra spectrum, which is why I also created that ultra spectrum classification system, which I've showed you too. So I do think that I can get close enough to not, I can't say prove it, but draft up a hypothesis that through the experiencers that we have a lot of similarities together. We share blood.
Well, I think it's
eye colors. There's a makeup to the ideal experiencer.
I think it's very interesting. And if you're able to prove that, that would almost be like saying, hey, I proved that God existed. But that might be a tough thing to do, but it would be, I'd like to see it.
Test the possibility through studying the people.
No, I think, first of all, I think that I agree with you about at least some of the ideas that you're talking about here. I don't know where I stand on things like time travel. I don't know where I stand on things like simulation, but I do think that those are both possibilities. And I do think that where we live in a world that we don't fully grasp, that is a reality we don't fully grasp, and ourselves that we don't fully grasp. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of these potentials that exist beyond us and within us. Yeah.
So let me set the scene here. All the research that you have in the world, you were just told that what you believe and think is true. And you are now, I guess, the president of the United States, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you're about to tell the people, say, imagine, put yourself in the president's shoes, and you have the answers, and what you've researched is true. What would you tell the people of what is really going on? You are giving the message to the public with what you know and what you believe is happening. What is that message?
I think I like to think that I would be fully honest in my answer. And I say I like to think because I don't know if there's physical threats that would be on my life or on family life. Like, you never really know how controlled these people are when you get to that level. But first of all, I hope that I'm wrong. I would actually like to be wrong about a lot of the things that I think. But let's say that I learn that everything that I think is true, and I have the power to I have the platform and the power to discuss it with the world. I would say that we have confirmation that there is a presence of others that are here, that have been interacting with us for a long time, and we need to come to terms with that fact. I would furthermore say that there has been a tremendous amount of deception going on for a long time about this, that may or may not mean that the people keeping the secrets are the ultimate bad guys. Even I don't know this fully yet. Like, I still will maintain that a lot of the people who are involved in the secrecy undoubtedly must think that they are in the right for keeping the secret. Mm-hmm. Now, people have all kinds of ways of justifying all kinds of pernicious beliefs, so that doesn't mean that they are right. But I'm sure they've justified it in their mind. But what I would say is there's a reality going on. There are beings that are here. They have been interacting with humans for at least a certain period of time. Abductions seem to be real. And I mean, it wouldn't shock me at all if there were backroom communications that have been going on between some of us and some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't shock me at all. And if that's the case, then
So,
I mean, I would want to tell the world. I would want to tell everyone.
and you just put that message out there. I'm just playing with the scenario here.
Yeah.
You have all the money in the world. What is your first course of action for the rest of the world now that we've just, announced this to us? What are you doing? What is President Richard Dolan doing for the people now that he just told us everything and has all the money in the world to change it? What would you do?
I would collect the best information that is available. Mm-hmm. I would make sure it gets published so that everyone can read it. This is why I could never be president. But I would do that, and I would I don't know. I would have to find out what measures need to be taken to ensure A, public safety, and B, public information, because people, I'm just going to say this because it should be obvious, people do have a right to know what is going on in this world around them. We can only be spoon-fed BS like little children for so long. At a certain point, we have to get to a point where we are not little children. At a certain point, we have to recognize, when are we going to get to the next level of whatever it is we're supposed to be? And, the fact is that no one is ever ready for whatever next new crisis or challenge happens in their life. Never going to be ready. You're never going to be ready for your first kid. I don't care how well you plan for it. You're never going to be ready until it happens. And then boom, now you have to scramble. And that's the way with many, many important things in life. And that's, some things happen whether or not we're ready for them. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality. And then we have to become ready. We have to make ourselves ready. So I think at a certain point, we're just going to have to be ready. We're going to have to figure this out. And that means international sharing of information and cooperation. It means a lot of things. Look, I can't pretend that I'm going to have every answer, because there's a lot of variables that I still don't know. But I'll say this. I think if I'm going to if there's one thing I believe in, if there's an ideal that I still maintain, it's that we deserve to have an informed citizenry and a functioning representative form of government. Mm-hmm. Now, we've done a lot of things in the last several generations to undercut our ability to do that well. I really do think there's been a significant degradation of our civic discourse and our public education and ability of people to know things. I think all of that's gone down significantly. So that's a problem. So we need to fix that. And one way to fix it is by shocking the public into realizing, wow, we're in a situation here, and we've got to be on our A game. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the one good thing that you can hope for out of disclosure, is that it's such a shock to our system, by which we realize, whoa, we have been lied to. We have been living in fairy tale land for at least 80 years. Since at least the 1940s, maybe longer. We've been spoon-fed fairy tales, and we need to now recognize that we're no longer little children, and we have to be like adults, and we have to be responsible. We have to be mature, and we have to figure out what the hell's going on and what's the best way to deal with it. That's all utopian. This is as utopian as I will ever sound. And I'm an anti-utopian. I don't believe in you. I think utopians, they scare me, to be honest with you. But the reality is that disclosure could very likely exacerbate a lot of the cultural and social tensions that we already have, frankly. You think about it. There's an announcement that aliens are here. You're going to have, right off the bat, two different camps. You're going to have very devout evangelical Christians on one side, and you're going to have very strong, New Ager types on the other, and they're going to have totally opposite takes on what these beings are. And there is no bridge long enough that can cover that gap. It's not possible. And then you're going to have a lot of other opinions as well that will be equally incompatible, probably. So we're not going to have an easy time agreeing on what we're dealing with. It'll take generations before we develop a consensus, and it'll be messy before then. But it doesn't matter. Convenience doesn't matter. What we want doesn't matter. This is, I don't know how much in control we really are, but this is going to come out because it's an inevitability. It will come out.
So I'm going to throw another layer on here, and then I'll help pull you out of this rabbit hole. But on this, and I'm going to dance around this geopolitical concept because I know we don't want to get anything in trouble. But I got to ask with this thought is we're looking at this from an assumption that it's the United States of America that's going to address the world. So if you had one step higher, where you had a choice of which nation should be on top of this, you don't trust which nation would you think would be the best?
It ought to be the United States, not because the United States is the best or the strongest or whatever. No. It ought to be the United States because all the evidence shows that the United States has had the longest and deepest interaction with this phenomenon, at least through its military, for many, many years. Like and plus the United States is just in the Western collection of nations. So that's the US, Canada, EU, Australia, New Zealand, a few others, Japan. The US obviously runs it. The US is the big dude there. So it, on that basis, should be. But there's other countries in the world. And what we're seeing right now is the breakup of a unipolar world. We're seeing it break into a multipolar world, obviously. So there's Russia, there's China, there's India. They're all outside the U.S. bloc now. There's Turkey, which is about to come out. Saudi Arabia is probably going to break out. I mean, it's astonishing what's happening.
What's stopping them from coming forward, especially with the way that we fight with each other, racing to the moon, racing to do all these other things? What's stopping them from blowing the whistle on this?
Because they are every bit as conservative on this matter as the United States. That's why. So, I used to wonder, would Putin in Russia do it? He could. He's got the knowledge. Putin was is a great admirer of Yuri Andropov, who was one of the last leaders of the Soviet Union, and Andropov also ran the KGB for the longest period of time of anyone there. Andropov was deep into UFOs. Well, you know this for a fact. And Putin totally admires Andropov. Do you think Vladimir Putin doesn't know a lot about UFOs? He knows a lot about it. There's no question. Why doesn't he disclose? Because he also, all of these people, and Xi Jinping of China, it's the same thing. These people want stability in their nations. They don't, and the UFO disclosure will do nothing if not rock the boat. It's going to rock the boat. And also, Russia has the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and they have one of the largest oil reserves in the world. UFO disclosure, when taken to its logical conclusion, very likely could lead us to a post-petroleum, post-hydrocarbon energy paradigm. It's totally possible. Whatever these objects used to go from one point to another point, it's probably not high-octane gasoline. So whatever it is, there's an answer in the UFO mystery that would take us beyond petroleum, beyond natural gas. And if you're someone like Putin or Xi Jinping or any of these other nations, changing your energy infrastructure, especially for Russia, what's in it for them? Nothing's in it for them. So I seriously doubt they're just going to go disclose on that basis. I doubt it.
This is the interesting thing about that is we fight about a whole bunch of different things, but yet we're all going to protect the secret of UFOs.
Yeah.
So that would suggest that it's a stronger being or of existence that has control of the entire.
Well, maybe not. It's possible, yes, but it's quite possible. I mean, most countries don't disclose because they can't. They're not gonna piss off the United States. I mean, we learned after Edward Snowden that the U.S. was tapping the cell phone of the president of Brazil and of the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. Her her communications are all monitored by the NSA. She learned to, so no national leader under the U.S. domination can say boo without the NSA knowing about it. So if some leader were to plan a disclosure, you better do it real fast. You better plan it all out in some open field by whispering into her other guy's ear, because otherwise NSA is going to know. Now, that's not true of some of the other nations. It's not true of Russia. It's not true of China, or Iran, for that matter. They have actually they're very sophisticated there. So they could do it, but they have their own reasons for not doing it. But to your point, I know we're running out of time here. Is there an alien domination over the human infrastructure? We haven't even touched this, but how could that be impossible? If they have some that look like us, there are stories going back 50, 60 plus years of apparent human ETs that have had very sophisticated conversations with people, not just all, wild contactees, but there's a number of these stories that are out there, and who knows? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible that they want to insert themselves into our structure of power for their own purposes. Of course they would want to. Are they doing it is the real question that we haven't proven. But if you're doing counterintelligence work on behalf of planet Earth, on behalf of humanity, you have to be looking at this possibility.
And I just want to clarify. We are running close to the end of our agreed time frame, but we are not out of time if you wish to continue. So
I'm happy to keep going, keeping on.
Okay, so so we can do an after chat and bring you in onto that, or we can just keep trucking along. And
well, I mean, we chatted with Stacey before we start. If she likes to come on, that's fine with me.
Okay, so this is what we'll do. We're going to play the after chat video. We'll end the show, and then we'll play the after chat, because the after chat is only for YouTube members. So for you listening to the audio replay, this conversation will happen on YouTube. So for those who are listening, thanks for listening. Keep your eyes in the sky, heed the world, and we will see you next year or in the after chat. So if you guys are still here, we'll see you in like a couple minutes. All right.
That's it, everybody. That is a wrap. That is the end of it all. Thank you for joining me tonight. I look forward to seeing you back next week, where we'll continue to have this conversation deep down into the rabbit hole in which we call the ultra spectrum. Thanks for joining us. I said that already. Oh well, fuck it. Heed the world. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
If you're not watching us on YouTube, you're missing out on the live after chat between Ryan, Stacey, and Cece.
In the after chat, we'll be speaking directly with those in the live chat to answer their questions and comments.
We also provide the latest updates for the Experiencer Support Association and our professional partners.
If you're interested to learn more about Tessa and what we do and see the video that goes with the audio, please visit the Experiencer Support Association on YouTube and subscribe. If you do this, you'll be able to join our live chat discussion.
Don't forget that notification bell for updates on all Tessa content and posts. Consider becoming a member of the Tessa channel for additional perks and exclusive content.
You can find us at www.experiencersupport.org to learn more about the work we do and the support we offer for experiencers and the resources and content available for these researchers, investigators, and enthusiasts of paranormal phenomena.
You are not alone, and we believe you.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep your eyes in the sky and
heed the world.
All right, we're back. Cece, you here?
Yes, I am. Unfortunately, my camera is frozen and acting up, so
That ain't no
audio
good.
only. Yeah.
Good, at least you're here. So, I mean, this is the first time we've really had a guest in the after chat. So,
Are you serious? I got to tell you, I had a real fun time with that interview.
well, I just cannot believe that the time is over. And I really hope that I don't have to work as hard as I did for the last 4 years to get your attention again, sir.
Right. I can't promise. It's been tough. I mean,
I know.
but I will do everything I can. I mean, I'm very glad that we did this. I'm very glad.
I'm
Yeah,
glad that
it's
you
a great
followed
interview,
through, and
guys.
I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to the people. And so the whole point of this after chat is always been to address the comments and the questions that we missed. Say hello to everybody. So, Cece, would you mind maybe, since you start a couple, to facilitate that, and then we can just Richard can answer. And what do you think?
Do my best. Yeah, do my best.
Yeah, sure. So I've started a few. So I'm just saying hi to Lisa Savoy, Alien Girl 111. My name is Ray. Was popped in the chat. Chris 32802. He had a question. So he asked, "Can you ask Richard? I'll put it up. Can you ask Richard what information led him to change his position on speculation about alien agendas? He seemed to previously have a position where he didn't seem that he didn't want to
Yeah,
speculate."
that's true. Well, let me be clear. I mean, I was always happy to speculate privately to myself. Of course, I always did that. But I did refuse for a long time to speculate publicly. Yeah, it was very important for me to be responsible about that, to be careful, and not to overstep what I thought the facts where they led me to. And furthermore, it was a matter of really wanting to protect and shield this field and to shield my own research from malicious attacks by people and that type of thing. So I always wanted to say things that I thought were defensible. But here's the thing. I wrote the Alien Agendas just 2 years ago. I'd been in this field for a long time, and I'd had a lot of time to think about the implications of what's going on. And I came to the conclusion that I had been thinking about this long enough to have genuine, cohesive thoughts about what I thought was actually going on. And there's never a crime in speculating. I've never felt that there's anything wrong with speculating. What's important to do is that when you speculate, you make it clear you're speculating, and you don't want to be too dogmatic about it. So I try not to be dogmatic about my speculations, but I do think it's that I've gotten to be in a pretty good position for a lot of reasons in the UFO field that I can offer some thoughts on what I think is going on, and so that's why I did it. And I'm glad that I've done that. I want to continue to do that. It doesn't mean that I've given up being a fact-based researcher. I don't think I have, but I think call it the benefits of turning 60. I'm old enough where I think I'm going to speculate a little bit here. Yeah.
I didn't know you were 60. Right on. You're looking good.
I turned 60 this year.
Wow.
Congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you. I'm glad I made it. I feel a little more creaky, it's true, than I used to, but I still overall feel pretty good.
I love that. I'm glad I made it. Yeah, that was a great response to that question, Richard,
Thanks.
and thanks for answering. We have I'm gonna attempt the name here. Almir Abrihimovic. I don't know if I said that right, but that's a cool name. He says, "Alien invasion coming soon," and there was quite the discussion in the chat about the concept of alien invasions and different folks like Corey Good and Randy Kramer suggesting those sorts of things.
Wow, I haven't heard those names in quite a while, to be honest. I don't know what they're up to. I think, let me just say this. I think what happened is that once 2017 came along, a lot of the whistleblowers, I'm using that phrase very loosely in this case, the jump room people and the 20 and back and some of these stories, I think people started to realize that these are not very credible. And I think the impression I got is that a lot of folks started walking away from those. I'd been having my problems with those for a long, long time. And but I think so. Anyway, I don't know what they have to say about alien invasions. I actually am not conversant with their current ideas about this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that their scenario is true to begin with. I mean, the scenario of I went to Mars, I fought reptilian aliens there. I think did Randy Kramer say that? I think maybe they both have said that. So I guess I'll just say I don't believe them. I don't believe that those are truthful. I think those are opportunistic, my opinion. So as far as
and then there's someone like Stephen Greer, sorry to interrupt you, who's saying that that's sort of like a decoy, the alien invasion, distraction.
Well, I don't agree with Stephen Greer either. So, I think we have a few things that we want to be concerned about with an extraterrestrial presence. Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons why an alien species that arrives here would want to subvert and get their hooks into what we're doing. I think there's a lot of reasons why they would want to. Does that mean they're doing it? No, not necessarily. But no, I think the attitude of someone like Dr. Greer is naive, bordering on almost criminal naivete. He has said that if you've had a negative experience, it was military. The aliens are not negative; they're benevolent. I'm like, where does he get off thinking really is the whole universe like that? There are no aggressive apex. There's no other apex predators out there. We're the only ones. Any alien species that is able to come here from wherever they are has become an apex predator on their world, guaranteed. And what does that mean? That means they run their planet. That means, like us, they're used to having their own way. That means they're probably used to subjugating all the other creatures on their world, just like we do. We're not nice. They're probably not nice either. And so for us to think that all the other species that are out there are somehow have evolved in their consciousness so that they don't need to be aggressive, I'm going to have a very different opinion there. Because aggression is intimately associated with things like initiative and creativity. It's very difficult to have the one without the other, in my opinion. At least if you're living in a biological suit like we do. You have to eat food, you have to procreate, you've got to do all the things that we do. Now, if you're able to become disembodied and become an entity of some sort, maybe it's different. I don't know what that's like. But some of these beings are not entities, they're beings. They're flesh and blood, and they are motivated by a survival instinct. They must be, just like we are. And so to pretend or to act as though they're all here because they want to help elevate us to the next density or whatever the hell that means, or the next mode of existence. I don't mean to sound disrespectful here, but I just think that that's naive. So it doesn't mean that they're all bad. It doesn't mean that none of them want to help us become better. I don't think that I believe that anyway. I think some of them might. I think that there's probably a big population out there. So so there's a lot of negative scenarios that don't involve blowing up the White House and blowing up, buildings like Independence Day. It could be a subversion. Is that like we talked about that briefly at the end of the last segment there. I think it's entirely possible that there's a subversion going on in our society that they have something to do with. I don't know that it's true, but I would not rule that out ever.
Something to add to that, because my thought is something I wanted to talk about earlier too, but it's kind of, this is kind of better to talk about it now. But on the whole idea of, we were just talking about nations, working together and then fighting against each other. And then if there's an issue with one country attacks the other country, and then all this other partner countries help that and do all these other things. So in the scenario of an alien invasion, if the location of where they're coming from is from another planet and they view this planet as a source of resources, then that makes sense why they don't care about us, because they just want the planet for whatever they need it for and they're going to conquer. But in response to that, do we have a divine race that's the protector and the creator? Whoever created us in this place should then respond to that alien invasion to defend this planet because it's their planet, not ours. So how do you, maybe that's the explanation for the good and the bad, preparing us for an external force so that way we can defend our home.
My answer to that is maybe, not much of an answer. So I think that we've been subject to long-term monitoring and observation and maybe genetic tweaking for a long time. I mean, I have wondered in my last book, I wondered openly, were we tweaked genetically? I put the estimate at 40,000 years ago. I probably should have put it back a little farther, which is still not outrageous, maybe 50, 55. But something happened to our species. This, I think, is becoming undeniable. We went through a kind of creative explosion. Now, I don't know how that it happened overnight, but it happened over a relatively short period of time. So maybe they did that. Maybe a visiting species looked at us and said, "These creatures, boy, they're close. We need to change something in the inner architecture of their brain." And we have to change some neural capacities and capabilities. And okay, there we go. We just did it. Now let's see what happens. And we'll watch that take off. That could have happened. And if that's the case, and then there are a number of, there's UFO sightings throughout history. Some of them are pretty interesting. Some of them are really overblown, in my opinion. But some are really worth looking at and make me think, yeah, there's probably been a presence here. But here's the thing. In my opinion, I think overall, probably it's been a lower level presence because the fact is, what could they do with us 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago? The answer is not a whole lot. Not really almost anything. What could we do with them? Basically nothing. Now, though, we're at a point, since we've discovered science, it's like the fire of Prometheus in ancient Greek mythology. It's like the gift of the gods. That's science. And that has transformed our world in this fast period of time. We go from basically living as how we lived for thousands of years to having railroads and balloons and electricity and Morse code and cars and radio and television and nuclear weapons and computers and iPhones and the web. And now AI and quantum computing and all the other crazy stuff. So like that's unbelievably fast. Okay. That's putting us, like we often forget how fast that is, but any observing intelligence is looking at us and they're like, okay, now it's time to get to Earth. This is where the action is. We need to be there because these humans, they're very creative. They're pretty full of themselves. They're pretty damned aggressive. They like to throw their weight around, and they're now going to be getting super strong AI and quantum computing. And they're going to be able to do a lot. We cannot let that run amok because I'll tell you one thing about these aliens. I feel strongly about this. I believe they're a very, very conservative, almost static group. Why do I believe that? Here's why. I don't know how much time we have, but hear me out.
We have as much time as you want, sir.
In our world, in our society, especially Western society, all of us grew up with this idea of progress. I remember being a little boy, like 4 years old in the 1960s, and my mother, who never went to college, never went to university, I didn't have any of that, she was talking to me about progress. I didn't know what that even meant, but I grew up with this concept, but I quickly understood. It meant I'm going to have it better than my parents. My kids will have it better than me and all of that. But, for most of human history, that's not what it was. We didn't have progress and no one talked about progress until the last couple of 100 years, but we're imbued with it. We think this is how it normally goes. And so we think progress is just going to go forever and ever and ever exponentially, but that can't be. That's impossible. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to have exponential, indefinite progress in anything. You can't go like that. You break the universe. So at some point we're going to hit a plateau. And I think we hit the plateau when we get through our full exploration of the physical reality of the universe, the age of science. That's what when I think we achieve that plateau. That's where these aliens are at now. And that is rapidly where we are approaching. We're not doing it all on the basis of our own native brain power. We're doing it with the aid of computers and AI, but we're doing it. And so when we get to that plateau, we're going to be probably very damn close to where they're at. They may still be at a couple of levels higher, but we're going to be pretty close. And we're going to be getting closer and closer. So in other words, it's like, think of progress not as a line that just keeps going up. Think of it as you ever study chemistry, and there's valence electrons. So the nucleus of the atom, you got your protons and your neutrons, and then you have electrons around it, and they're in orbits. So the first orbit only can take 2 electrons, and then when you get that next one, it's got to go to another orbit. And then you fill that one up, and then you have another orbit. So nothing's gradual, and I think that's the way our progress is. I think like we started out as hunters and gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. That's how human beings lived, and our predecessors, Homo erectus, and all of those. They discovered fire, and they had spears, and they would bring back animals, and you lived in nature. And then 10,000 years ago, we discovered agriculture, basically. And we settled down. We domesticated animals and plants, and we created phase 2. I call stage 2 of human existence. That is cities, writing, metallurgy, everything from ancient Egypt to the Roman Empire to the Italian Renaissance. That's stage 2. It was an amazing stage. We did great with it. And then we came to stage 3, which is science and industry, scientific revolution, which really changed us and gave us a completely different form of living, a different cosmology, different organization of our reality. Everything changed. And now I think we're moving into stage 4 very rapidly, transhumanist or whatever the hell it is. But it's a totally different phase of existence. And I think that's where they're at. So I think we're starting our entry into that other. We're still we just cracked open the door. But it could be in another century or 2 centuries from now, we may be in it. And frankly, I don't want any part of it. I don't want to be part of it. I like being an actual human being, unenhanced, my genetics being what they are. I just like, but again, what I care for doesn't matter. So I think we're going to move into that, and that's why they're interested in us, because we're about to join their club, and during this transition, we might be in a very unstable existence. This is why I think we're having a global revolution right now, by the way. I think the guys at Davos and, the Bilderberg meetings and the financial masters of our world, they see the writing on the wall, and they're just forcing it along real fast. So they're creating a global digital police state. That's what they're doing. They've got all the national leaders, but mostly under their thumb, certainly in the West. And they're just going to create a kind of a human hive mind. And of course, there's too many people in their opinions. They're going to cull the herd, which I think will happen as well. So we're going to move into a new phase of human existence. That's, like if this conversation survives 200 years into the future and people are watching this, like, hello, future. But they might be thinking, wow, Dolan was so backward. Like, he had no idea about how awesome things are. And that could be. And I hope that's the case.
Or they would be like, Richard was a prophet, and Nostradamus, all those other things, start a revolution.
Well, I mean, I studied history my whole life. I've studied history since I was a teenager. And at this point, I would say I know history very well, very well. And when you know enough history, maybe you become a little comfortable looking into the future. And I do. I am comfortable looking at the future.
Would you share that cliche, history repeats itself?
Well, yeah, actually, the best version of that cliche is that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I do think that's actually true. Nothing ever repeats exactly. Yeah. But there are certain things that are consistent. Yeah. And you do want to learn from some mistakes of the past, because it's still easy to repeat the mistakes of the past, no matter how much you think you learn it, though. That's because every situation is new, and it's tough to predict. But anyway, I think that there's a definite, like, you'd have to consider the possibility that at least one group of alien wants to manage our transition to this next stage. Maybe ultimately for good reasons, and maybe for their own purposes. I wouldn't rule out that that there are capitalist alien groups out there trying to make money, alien traders. Trading, by the way, is how human civilization really started in a lot of ways, you could say. Trading in obsidian or ancient metals. And that's really probably how the first cities and kingdoms really initiated, is through controlling trade routes. There's a lot of money and power in that. And would that be any different on an interstellar basis? Like if you control human DNA, you'd be like, holy crap, I can get a lot of good stuff for this human DNA. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's in there. Maybe that's part of the mix. I mean, there's just so much we don't know. Mm-hmm. I feel like a 10-year-old kid at a candy store with the lights off, and I'm pressing my nose against the glass, trying to look inside and seeing what's in there. And there's the curtain's mostly closed, but there's a little crack, and I'm trying to see what's in there. That's what this phenomenon is like to me. It's there's certain things that we can see and figure out, but there's still a lot that is kept back from us.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. So normally we end this after chat after a half an hour, but I mean, how long do you want to go?
I'll go a little longer. I mean, at some point I'm going to have to say goodnight.
Yeah, and when we get to that point, we just need to remind everybody that next week is Experiencer Day. So that's on December 8th. So
9th. December 9th.
Pardon me, December 9th. A full day from 9 a.m. till 11 p.m. We're going to have some presentations on there, and that'll be our send-off for the whole year, and then we're on Christmas holidays.
And Experiencer Day on the 21st.
And Experiencer Day on the 21st. So that way, okay, that's covered. So then now, the other part is I want you to give me a 5-minute warning so we can have we can talk to you before you sign.
Good. And before you ask me your next question, I just want to point out, I really think it's fabulous that the two of you work together the way that you do and support each other like this.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's really, it's heartening to see that.
And it's interesting because we were having a conversation about that this morning about the duality between us, right? Like, I mean, her job is focused on making sure that the experiencers get the best for the experiencer as an experience. My job is to make sure that the information is true and factual, so that way we can make safe decisions for the experiencers. And we were literally just talking about the possibility of us getting into a discord in the future, perhaps, if I get too dark into this rabbit hole of disclosure versus, she's bringing in all this light here. And for you to recognize that today is kind of like right on point. And another thing that I was kind of doing too is trying to figure out why I click with you so much and why I have this understanding and approach, because I did a lot of studying on zodiacs and personality types. And I did a quick look because I remember.
Do you know my chart, my astrological chart?
Well, I don't know your astrological chart, but I remember that you were born on Canada Day because we had that joke about being Canada's favorite Canuck or favorite Canadian. So I might try to steal that hat from you. You'd be number 2. I'll be number 1 for Canada.
Well, if you do charts seriously, I'll tell you. I was born 11:25 a.m. in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay,
on July 1st, 1962.
11:25, Brooklyn, New York.
You do that mofo chart.
Is that Yeah, we can do that.
I've had. I'll just tell you. See, 11:25 a.m. July 1st, Brooklyn.
Okay, so to finish my thought, what I was saying is I quickly looked because I'm a Gemini, how Geminis and Cancers work together, because you'd be a Cancer. Yeah. And I'll quote what it says. It says, Cancers will teach Geminis how to slow down and take the environment more fully, while a Gemini helps the Cancer come out of its shadow. And we did that today. I brought you into this rabbit hole, and then you're also pacing it. So, it's in the stars, this connection. So
my mother was a Gemini, and my mother was one of the most high energy, crazy people that I've ever known. God love her.
And what's your opinion on astrology then? That is just.
Well, I'll tell you. So here's the thing.
That was a question I actually had because
I'm actually happy to talk about this.
Okay.
So I'll give you my first opinion. My main opinion is that astrology, and I'm unapologetic about this. I don't care anymore. Astrology tells me that there are things about our reality that we do not understand.
Huh?
I've talked to a million astrologers, not a million. I've talked to many astrologers, and I'll say, well, why does astrology work? And I've never gotten an answer to that. Like they'll say, oh, it obviously works. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm seeing that, but why? We don't have an answer in our physics. So anyway, I've had 4 or 5, I think 5 astrologers over the years do my chart. Some of them have no idea who I am. Some did. The ones who didn't, it was done through intermediaries, like friends who said, would say to me, I've got a friend who's a good astrologer. Can I have him do your chart? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And they don't tell the person who I am. And I will say that every single astrologer, every single one, has said the exact same things about me. And those things that they said about me were true things every single time. I mean, the things that they may have gotten wrong were insignificant. The things they got right were all big things, all major things. Every single one. The best one was the first one that was done. And this was an intermediary case. This was an astrologer in Canada who, where the hell did she live? It'll come to me. Out in the boonies in Ontario, but there's a lot of parts of Ontario that are pretty remote.
Yep.
And this woman, I after this, I called her the Oracle because she was just too good. So there's my cat playing with a toy there. This woman, this is back in 2003, 2002, something like way a long time ago. She put her whole thing on a cassette tape. Remember cassette tapes? And she gave it to our mutual friend who then mailed me the cassette tape. The only thing this woman knew was my first name. And I know for a fact, and because I later met her in person, and I know she was absolutely on the level in every single way. And she's a wonderful, beautiful human being. So, and she was this elderly Canadian grandma type. Like you just want to give her a big hug. She's like, well, Richard, I'm looking at your chart. And you've got this, and I didn't know any of the terminology. Says, you have this interesting grand trine. I'm like, what the hell is that? Well, I guess that's a pretty nice thing. And you've got your Mercury and the ascendant, and you got this and that. And okay, so I can say you're a very good communicator. And I'm thinking, all right, well, I like to think of myself as a good communicator. She said, but it's not just that. You're very engaged in the activities of the world, and I would even say politics. And I'm thinking, oh, all right, that's getting kind of warm. Because I have studied geopolitics longer than I've studied UFOs. I've studied that whole thing since I was a kid. She says, but it's not just that. You've got this, there's this element here that is very into the occult and paranormal. I even want to say UFOs. At this point, I almost fell off my chair. Because I've got this astrologer. I don't know who this lady is. And she's saying, you're a good communicator. She said, oh, yeah, I think you're a very good writer. And you're into politics. And I think you're into UFOs or paranormal. And I'm thinking, all right, did you look me up? That's actually what I thought. But she didn't. And I know she didn't. I know for a fact she did not. Wow. So she actually said, if I really thought you should be writing about UFOs and conspiracies, which was exactly what I do, of course. And she said many other things. I still have the recording. It's an MP3 now. She also did a chart for my son, who at the time was 9 years old. And nobody knew my son, obviously, other than his family. And she called my son's personality. She got it exactly right. And then she said, I have a fear about your son. She wondered if there'd be like a childhood abduction thing, but she said it's either that or maybe an illness. And she mentioned 2 illnesses. Now, I don't know if this is astrology or if she's just being a psychic, because she's kind of a psychic from everything that I've learned about her. But she mentioned diabetes as one of the 2. And within a year, less than a year later, my son came down as an insulin-dependent diabetic. Now, you can just say things like lucky guess, or you can say, you know what, there's something going on here. And that's my attitude. And by the way, my son's health is perfect. He's 26 years old, and he's been able to take me down for a long time. His health, he does a great job at managing the diabetes. He's in great shape. But my point is that this woman called it, and she had me nailed. And then I've had other astrologers who've equally.
It's uncomfortable. Makes
you wonder, right? Makes you wonder what's our reality.
Well, we did a show with an astrologist named Dave Petrella, and I was humble enough to be able for him to do a live reading for everybody, and that was a wild show because like I knew he didn't know anything other than what I project out there, and yeah. Are you born AM or PM? You said 11:25, but you didn't say
AM. 11:25 in the morning.
I think I can pull that right now.
No, you want to get that right
on live off the cuff.
I got it. I just needed to wait until.
Okay.
Well, anyone else out there? If they're an astrologer listening, they can do my chart.
Well, I got your chart. It's right here. Hold on. I'm not an astrologer. I mean,
I was going to say, Ryan, are you?
Yeah, I can get your chart. Now, do I know what this means? I certainly do not.
Can you zoom in more on it?
Yeah.
Is Mercury at the midheaven? Mercury should be at the ascendant.
So let me.
I'm Virgo rising.
As am I.
And I'm I'm a sun and moon or Cancer. So that's what that should be in there. Yeah. I don't know astrology very well.
You have sun and moon? Both are Cancer?
That's correct.
Wow.
That's
right. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But then Mercury is at my ascendant, and that's supposed to be communication, I believe. And I there's a lot more I can. And you've got the different houses, and I couldn't begin to interpret that.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff.
It gets very deep. It's very sophisticated. Here's the thing about it. A very modern atheistic scientist would say, well, that's all bullshit. Can I say that? But the thing is, I really think that, I can't say that I understand why it seems to work. It does seem to work. It seems to be accurate. And I'm not comfortable saying it's coincidence. I think that there's something there. And I don't know what it is and why it is. And by the way, earlier, Ryan, you were talking about, are we in a simulation or a holographic universe? And if there's any one reason why I might think it's possible, this might be it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no logical reason to me why astrology ought to work. I cannot think of a reason why it should, but it seems to. And to me, that's an indication that there's a big, big, big thing we're missing in our structuring of reality, of the fabric of reality. We're missing something big. And I don't like the idea of thinking we're in a simulation or that. But you know what? Ancient people, they didn't believe radically differently in some ways. The ancient people, all of them, believed that we were at the will of the gods. That things that happen are because of fate. You go to ancient Greek mythology, they had the three fates. I forget their names, but one spun the web of life for each person. One measured that web, and one cut the web to end your life. In other words, the idea being, and even the Olympian gods could not overcome the fates. Everything had to bow to the will of the fates. In other words, the idea, and I think there's wisdom there. It's like, there are forces in this world that are beyond our ability to control, and wisdom resides in knowing when to submit to the fates. What's the serenity prayer? God, give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the strength or the courage, whatever. Yeah. So the strength. So I think the ancients understood that, and what if that's our reality? What if we are controlled much more than we think we are? Mm-hmm. Or maybe, I don't know how it works. Maybe there are predilections or predispositions that we're given, but we still have some free will in there.
Yeah.
See, to add layer to that, if that was true, since we're speculating here, the simulation idea is probable, because then we could interpret this information based on the day you were born. And I have mine in there too, just taking a quick comparison to kind of see if there was any similar patterns. But I mean, and if time travel exists, then what's stopping someone from making sure that this soul that is waiting to be inhabited in this near-death experience,
okay,
to pinpoint and surgically have an individual born at a precise minute in time to cause and affect the future. So they would have to know exactly why this soul needs to be born at this time to change the world 60 years later and be on a podcast with this kid right here.
This is some crazy shit that I've also thought about. I've actually come to the same
because I've been thinking about this a lot lately.
Well, and I wonder if a black budget paramilitary or military corporate type organization is doing this, and I suspect that they would have experts in astrology that would be looking for interesting people on this basis. I've actually heard, well, I don't know how reliable the source was, but it did come to me at least once as a possibility, and I think, yeah, kind of, it could make some sense. Or not just military, but beyond, whatever that could be.
I mean,
yes,
it's possible, and I have to, in order for me to understand past lives, I got to investigate myself and look into things that have. And there's been some associations with this astrology stuff that's really been...
Let me throw another idea out there, because this is such a great conversation. So, in our culture, in our world, we tend to associate spirituality with ethics. You think of Christianity, which is a very, very profound system of ethics, like big time. But the fact is it possible that there could be a species or a culture that develops spirituality without ethics? And I think the answer has got to be yes. Like, spirituality, when you really think about it, is simply the recognition of another level to this reality, another way to, deal with space and time in some manner. And if there are other groups that know how to manipulate space and time and what we would call spirituality, what if they're not bound by some kind of ethical constraint? What if they don't give a crap? What if they know how to manipulate that world on that basis, and they just do it because it helps them? I mean, is that possible? It is possible, because when you think about the ethical connections that we have with spirituality in our world, it came about, I would say, explicitly because of Christianity. When I look at pre-Christian ancient society, I mean, they were doing things like really nasty stuff. I mean, not that the Christians didn't continue a lot of it, but it was mitigated. I just think that it was a lot easier to be a monster in some of those earlier times, including things like cannibalism and all kinds of really exquisite tortures. And yes, I know the Inquisition did incredible tortures, and but the actual Christian ethic, you can only engage in those tortures if you just twist the ethics out of proportion. That's my opinion. I think that the actual ethical foundation of Christianity has had such a huge impact on world society. Even for non-Christian nations, it's deeply affected their ethical position. And if we didn't have that belief, you have to wonder, how would we have evolved as a civilization in these last 2,000 years?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that
we take a lot of that stuff for granted. Even if we don't believe, whatever your beliefs are, you don't have to believe in all of the details of the cosmology, but the ethics actually were really important. So there may be an alien species that has total spiritual mastery, but they may not believe the way that we do. I'm just spitballing here.
I mean, someone would have to see the end game. They would have to know. And then you're taking that the whole concept in the Christian perspective is that God is not supposed to interfere in all these other things and all these rules and stuff. But just because they're not supposed to doesn't mean they aren't. And when they interfere in certain stages in certain ways, I mean, someone would have to know the end game. And then to rationalize all this, I always come back to the part that we're needed for something. Otherwise, they would destroy us in the same way. So there is some sort of need to preserve us and protect us to keep us going.
Yeah, I think we're quite valuable.
Yeah,
I think so.
That's to be harvested for organs and stuff for to feed an extraterrestrial race. I don't want to go that dark, but I hope that we're valuable to the sense of carrying our civilization to the next level.
Yeah, I think our consciousness is valuable, and it's got a lot of potential for the future. And now we're now entering an era in which we're going to be self-modifying ourselves. It's self-directed evolution, and that scares me to death, to be honest with you. But it's obviously going to happen. There's too much pressure for it not to happen. Parents are going to want their kids to have the best. I'm looking at the next question there.
Yeah, no. So
we'll talk about Skinwalker in a second. I just think there's going to be a lot of pressure to promote transhumanism in the next several generations. It's going to be overwhelming.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. I just saw this and I wanted to have it there. And I think
Skinwalker. Well, can I talk about Skinwalker here? Then I probably should say goodnight soon.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I just want to point out this is Michael Elzinga. I have not seen him on a chat for a while. Michael was part of the thought process when him, myself, and my wife Priscilla were trying to decide what to name this podcast, and I haven't seen him on in a while since this. So he's he was the one in that discussion that threw out the word "Beyond the Tinfoil Hat," and we were all like, "Yep, that's it." So I just kind of want to point out for a second here that guy I haven't seen in a while. I'm glad to see it.
Greetings to Michael, and you guys came up with a good title for a program, I got to say. As far as with Skinwalker, I'm not the most expert person on it. I mean, I've read. Actually, I haven't even read all of the last book. I'm embarrassed to say. I read Hunt for the Skinwalker twice a couple of years ago, and I know George Knapp, and I know a lot of the folks involved there. So I know, a fair amount of things that go on there. Okay, so one thing I don't think it is. I don't think it's totally explainable as black budget tech, which some people have argued. I don't believe that. I think that there's something genuinely strange there. And I'm a very big admirer of Dr. Eric Davis, who worked at Skinwalker for a long time, and Colm Kelleher, who, by the way, from what I was learning, has probably some of the most deepest security clearances of all of those people there. No one ever hears about Colm Kelleher. But anyway, they've talked about some of the very bizarre things. And I watched Jeremy Corbell's documentary on Skinwalker, which I thought was quite good, especially because of the George Knapp footage that he had from the 90s. So you got some very strange cattle mutilations that happened there. You have some very strange creature sightings. You had the dire wolf sighting. You had the kind of a potentially portal type of a sighting there. You have the case when they were trying to record. They would have their cameras stationed at different places. What was it? One of the cameras was destroyed, and the camera that should have caught the destruction of the one camera was itself disabled before that happened. And like there's a very high order of let's say trickster intelligence that's been operating there. And I do think that we're dealing with an intelligence that is orders of magnitude beyond what we have the ability to understand. I think Eric Davis himself called it, what do you call it? Pre-conscious, or like they know of things that we're not yet aware of. They know about them before we have the ability. What were you going to say, Stacey?
I was going to ask Richard why then do you feel that they're contained to the ranch or in that area? Like, what would be keeping them there rather than spreading to a more,
I don't know. Maybe electromagnetics, maybe gravity, maybe something having to do with the Earth itself. I mean, Earth is magnetic, and the Earth has. I mean, I don't understand all of Earth geology, frankly, but I know we have a magnetic field, and we've got different forces on Earth that might affect this type of activity, for all I know. But I don't really have a good. I'm not the best person for a hypothesis.
No, yeah, and that's fair, Richard. I was just curious if you had any theories, because that's one thing about Skinwalker that kind of irritates me, because it just baffles me that, we have these,
well, there are hot spots. It's not just Skinwalker.
Yes,
there are other places.
Portals sort of thing. They're not necessarily stuck there.
I remember the late Ted Phillips, who was investigating a place called Morley Woods in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, I don't think they ever published their full results. He died, and he had a posse. That's what he called them. I met some of those guys, but I don't know if anything's been published. But they also said that it was like what they were looking at was like Skinwalker. And I'm sure that's true. And I think there are various places where weird things happen. So why that's the case, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
It's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for entertaining that question.
Okay. I think there are such places, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let's end it so that way we can have a quick chat before we say good. Like after we end the show here. What is your final words or your parting thoughts and messages to all the people listening? Tell them where to find you. Tell them.
Oh well, anyone who's interested in what I do. You can always go to my YouTube channel, which is Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. I do a lot of podcasts and things there. And then really I do even more than that on my website, richarddolanmembers.com. Anything that they see on YouTube, I do way more on my website. So there's a paywall there, okay, so I got to pay the bills. That's what I do. But we try to keep it affordable. And I will say I've got a number of apparently very happy members there. I try to keep them all happy. And I do a lot of interaction with people there too. Mm-hmm. So richarddolanmembers.com is probably nice. If you want to support me, that's a good way to do it. And I keep myself busy. Like I'm working on 3 book projects. It's too many book projects. I am working on volume 3 of UFOs in the National Security State. There may be a volume 4, to be honest. I think it'll have to be a 4-volume thing. But I'm just about to publish a new and expanded version of UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. It's going to have a new cover. It's going to have 45 additional pages. So it's a lot. And then I'm going to get to the USO book, which I'm very committed to. I'm really into that. I think it'll be there's some other good USO books that have been out there, but this is going to be a genuine history of it, which really has not been done to my satisfaction. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll go back to the volumes of history that have dominated my life. So I keep busy, and here's the thing. I feel, at least mentally, I feel better than I've ever felt in my life. It's amazing that it's taken me this long to get to a point where I feel that I see more clearly than I've ever seen before. I wish I had the energy that I had in my 30s and my early 40s. Like back then I could work to 2 a.m, no problem. Nowadays, like after dinner, I'm done. I can't do any good work. I can read a little bit. I can do some of that, but writing, no way. So I'm good in the mornings. I'm good in the afternoons.
Well, thank you
up to dinner time
for heroing this season finale in the wee hours of the night.
I've enjoyed this very much.
Going into overtime, and it does bring me back to that beer conversation we had, where I remember Tracy was yelling at me and yelling at you because it was time to go to bed. 3 o'clock in the morning, we were just going and going, and
that's right.
Talking about the
that was a lot of fun.
Autopsy, and you were. I remember you'd be like, it's all about the year, and you were like, I love you, and I'm like, I love you too, and Tracy's just like,
holy crap! I remember the outlines of that. I can't remember a thing I said, but
we could go forever. So, thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure.
So much for allowing me to at least have you on my show 4 years later.
We'll do it again. I won't make you wait 4 years.
No, I know, but I'm internally grateful for the path that you sent me on, and what better way to say thank you than to be able to receive you on this show. That was the whole idea was inspired to take care of experiencers by you, and to have you here in full circle. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the experiencers.
I'm so glad about that. I'm really, truly glad about that.
And it validates my mission, and I hope that I'm still doing, in the next.
Because you know what? Like, the thing that we want to do is we want to positively affect other people.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're saying that I could do that for you just makes me feel really wonderful. And I think this is the work that the both of you are now doing. You're going to be inspiring, or you probably already have inspired others. And
we're trying, and that's the thing. And I agree with your thought. I can't change this. I don't know that. I can't solve these questions. But one thing I know for sure is that I can help the people stop feeling like crap. And as long as I help you feel better, we help you feel better, then the information we get from them will be more valuable and more important and more useful. So that way we can determine, what is going on, and so we can survive after disclosure.
And let's remember, we human beings, we're social animals. We're intensely social animals. And we, when we go through something really inexplicable and difficult, we need human connection. We really need it. And so that's really an important thing that you guys do.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to play our last minute video, and then I'll end the show, and then we'll chat, and then we'll end the night. So, Stacey, anything to say? Parting gifts? Parting words?
Not at all. I'm really grateful for Richard being here. Thank you so much for your time. Heed the world, everyone.
Heed the world. And remember, E-Day is next Friday. So this video that's playing is E-Day. We'll see you there. It's going to be a nice, full, long day of giving back to the experiencers, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have anything to talk about. Wouldn't have anything to write about. So thanks for watching. Keep your eyes in the sky. Heed the world. And we'll see you next week.